Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Hot Mic Podcast. I'm Nathan Ivy, your humble host. And as always, I am not alone. I want to welcome in today's crew. Today we have Raven Mundy, Phil Heimlich, and my road dog in this, Kevin Aldridge. How is everyone doing?
You call
Doing
your
pretty
what?
good.
I'm sorry, your what? You said
That's my
road
road
dog?
dog. That's my road dog. We on this journey together.
Oh, okay. I'm just checking. I'm not very hip about things, so I always want to try to
I
understand
don't know
you.
how hip
You
that
trying to
is.
figure out why you didn't call him your your road dog?
Yeah, yeah. Why you didn't call me that? Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking.
You feel some
Look at
type of
Raven
way.
starting stuff already. Look at
The
Raven
story of my
starting stuff
life. Oh, it's
already.
the story of my life. Always the bridesmaid. That's the story of my life.
Okay. All right. I'll take all of that. How is everybody on this beautiful Friday?
Doing pretty good.
Well,
So we're a week into the Trump administration, and there's a lot of things happening right now. I call it shock and awe. He's trying to shock everybody, in some cases into submission. And there's a lot of things happening right now, which we'll get a chance to talk about, hopefully a lot of it. Now, just for the audience, we were scheduled and are scheduled to be joined by our good buddy, Kevin Gordon. I'm starting to think that Kevin is ducking his smoke a little bit. It's very suspicious, Kevin. I know you go back and you watch this, man. I ain't calling you out, bro, but he said he has some business going on. He said he might try to join us a little bit later, so hopefully he will.
no,
He'd want to add to the
I know where
conversation.
he is. No, he mentioned that he has some meeting with I don't know, the leadership of the Oath Keepers or something like that. None of my business. That's his schedule. It's none of mine.
Well, the leadership has been pardoned by Trump this week, so that is a possibility. I don't know how plausible it is, but I guess it's possible. So you're gonna get yourself in trouble. He's gonna say you're not really a conservative again. You're not really a Republican.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not a law and order guy. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I'm not. I'm just not a law and order guy. That kind of thing. Yeah, for sure.
There's been a lot that has happened this past week, but there's been a constant theme, many throughout the Trump administration, and that is his assault on DEI. Trump has said that he believes that DEI initiatives are illegal, and he is by executive order trying to purge it from the federal government. We've touched on DEI many times, but here we go again. And I want to know how we feel about this. Is DEI the culprit for a lot of what people say are the problems with America? Do we agree with Trump that DEI is reverse discrimination for white people? How do you feel?
Well, if your if your definition of DEI is just hiring and giving any minority a job, then if that's how you look at it, then of course you're going to view it as wrong and discriminatory. But that is not what DEI is. That is often how it gets cast improperly. DEI is not about giving unqualified people or undeserving people jobs that they should not be having. All DEI is about is casting a wider net. Look, how many times have you worked? And most white people probably won't get this because I get this a lot as a black person. Oftentimes, one of only a handful.
Here you go again with your
No,
bias.
I'm just being real, man. I'm just being real. I know it's offensive. It's probably offensive to you and a lot of white people who hear that. Who hear that when I say it, but I'm just being real because this is the experience that I have, and you can't duck the truth. In almost every corporate environment that I've been in until recently, until DEI became something of a thing, whenever you had a job opening, they would always come to me and ask, hey, do you know any person of color that you could recommend possibly for this job? Because they had no mechanisms in place to figure out how to find, recruit, and retain people of color. So they would go around and ask, hey, do you know anybody? And I'm like, hey, y'all not paying me to recruit. Y'all not paying me to recruit employees. I'm not a recruiter, right? You hired me to do a specific job, not help you find employees. And so this was something that a lot of corporations struggle with. And what they would always say when they had a dearth of minority hires there, well, we can't find anybody. People aren't applying for the jobs, or we can't find anybody. And so coming up with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs really force corporations to develop techniques and strategies to find minority candidates for when they had job openings, because otherwise there were very few, if any, that were getting opportunities at those jobs. So it's not about giving anybody something that they don't deserve. It's about casting a wider net and creating opportunities for people of color, women, and others who oftentimes get passed over for opportunities. And that's what it's about. It's not giving undeserving people. No minority wants that. I mean, look, I don't want somebody of color in a position who is not qualified, who is not capable, because I know what every other person of color knows is that if that person screws up and looks incompetent and is bad at their job, then that's going to make it hard for me and the next minority who comes behind them. So we always want somebody who's in a position of power, who is a minority, to be excellent, to be exceptional in their job, because we know how we're going to be judged if they're not. So nobody wants an unqualified person of color in a job, including people of color.
Anybody else? Raven, Phil, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll tell you something ironic that I just borrowed or just heard on a New York Times podcast. And, we've had this discussion. We can argue back. I'm not a big DEI guy. We've had this, I believe, in sort of merit-based. But what's ironic is, and this is what they were discussing in this podcast, it is that when Trump issued these orders about DEI, and if you listen to or read his statement, he goes, we want things to be it's got to be merit-based from now on, okay? Well, guess what? Throughout the whole federal government, they are putting people kind of on paid leave and basically checking their whole record, social media, things they've said, coworkers, for loyalty to Trump. And anybody who has voiced any disagreement with Trump on almost any level, okay, they're not going to get their job's gone. So I think it's ironic that he's saying this DUI is to get things merit-based, but in fact, throughout the whole government, it's not merit-based, it's loyalty-based.
In any level of high business, there is no such thing as diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is first of all, we got to start at the basics, because I think that we are so comfortable calling it DEI that we're not saying the actual words. And the definition of what it is in the actual words. It is diversity, it is equity, and it is inclusion. It is not some vehicle for privilege for minorities. It is not some vehicle for, unfair treatment by anybody who is not a marginalized group. What it is a leveling of the playing field. What it is a response to, for generations, the playing field has been unfair, and you have all had hundreds of years of a head start. And so we are now putting forth initiatives to fill the gap that is that head start that you experience. And I think that when you forget to define it for what it is and call it what it is, which is not just an acronym, but actual diversity, actual equity, actual inclusion in the workplace and in other places where, somebody can create, a pathway to their American dream. I think that you got to say the word. So from henceforth, I don't want to call it DEI. I personally would like to say the words, because when you don't say the words, it's very easy to remove the actual words from the definition. And I think that when you say it like that, when you call it what it is, there's no way that you can look at it and say, well, this is a way, this is not merit-based. It is actually the most merit-based hiring process that you can have, because now you know for a fact that every white person in a position of power is there because they're qualified, not because their employer is a racist, not because their employer is a bigot, not because their employer saw a black face or a face of color or a female face or a Muslim face and decided, you know what, I don't like you and what you stand for and what you represent. So I would much rather hire this unqualified white guy because he's white, and I would prefer to have him in my face versus you. I think that the undoing of DEI is actually, it just to me is what people are saying it is. It is racism. It is white supremacy in action.
Well, follow up on what Raven just said about whether you use the words or not. One of another feature of the executive orders that Trump issued, they're going so far as to say that if somebody in your department is kind of engaging in what would be called DEI, but not using the words, then you need to snitch on them. That's what they're telling them.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of
McCarthyism.
But it's McCarthyism. It's absolutely McCarthyism. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
it's.
I think
sorry,
what Raven said. Nah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'll get right back to you, bro, once I land. I think that Raven touched upon something that I often use as a rebuttal when I'm talking with people who are resistant to DEI. And I ask them, so what part of it do you have a problem with? Is it the diversity part, the equity part, or the inclusion part? And to this point, I've never heard a good response to it. I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot of white people in this country who are justifiably upset. They have every right to be upset because the American dream, what they were promised, has not realized. They were promised that if I don't commit crimes, if I get married, if I take care of my children, if I work 40, 50, 60, 80 hours, if I commit to my employer, then I'll be able to live the American dream. And that hasn't happened. Simultaneously, this happened going back to Rush Limbaugh. You had conservative media that has been telling these people who are justifiably upset that the reason why the world is not what you think it is, the reason why you have not captured the American dream is because of the immigrants, is because of DEI, is because of the liberals, is because of this, is because of that. And after 30, 40, 50 years of that, it has metastasized into this. This country has a history. White people in this country have a history of resorting to violence when they see Black people and other people living the American dream. We all know what happened. We could talk about Rosewood and Black Wall Street or the Red Summer of 1919. They call it that because the streets were paved in Black blood, because white people got in their feelings, because Black people were doing well. Fast forward to 2016 with Donald Trump. He tapped into that angst. He tapped into that fear and that anger, and that's why we are now. This isn't violence, but it's policy violence against what white people think is losing their country to the other.
But Nathan, that's just the fallacy of that whole premise that somehow white folks are losing. Look, they may be justified. They may be justified in their feelings and outrages of promises or dreams denied. But just imagine where Black people are in this country, where first of all, you had no rights and privileges. You were essentially considered property for a pretty good deal of the history of this country. And then when you managed to get out of that, you were still reneged on promises that the federal government made to you in terms of the nature of land and property and things that you were going to be getting. So if anybody has a right to have righteous outrage or righteous indignation, it's minorities in this country. And this country owes Black people in this country a debt that it can't possibly repay. But we don't want to have that conversation about reparations because, again, that's another hot button issue for white folks in this country. But it's undeniable that they cannot undo the generational damage that was done by slavery and Jim Crow, and the fact that governmental programs that were meant to somewhat try to mitigate those situations and promises that the federal government made and did not keep. Right. We're trying to right size things as much as possible. And even that is not enough. There's still an utter rejection of that, a rejection of it in a way that if they were subjected to those same things, they would not accept. And that's the hypocrisy of it. They're upset because they feel like they're upset and they're ready to revolt and change the Constitution and do all sorts of other things because they feel like minorities are taking something from them. Imagine if they had been subjected to the same. This is why I make this statement, and white folks have gotten mad at me for making this statement, but I honestly and truly believe this is true. As graciously as Black folks have handled how badly they've been treated in this country without resorting to violence, there's no doubt in my mind, and we saw it on January 6th, there's no doubt in my mind that if subjected to the same things historically that Black people have been subjected to, there would not be as non-violent a response as what we see.
Bro, absolutely.
As
You
what you've
use a
seen historically from Black people, absolutely would not. And people will
absolutely,
argue
I
me
agree with
down.
you.
They get mad when I say that. But the evidence, and I always point to the history of the evidence that there's more of a history of violence against other people perpetuated. Right
White
now,
people.
people will look at modern day crime and talk about Black, but I'm just talking about race against race violence. Who has perpetuated more violence against another race in this country than anybody else? Haven't been Black people.
You know,
Has not been Black people.
You use a quote in our personal conversation. You might have said it once or twice on the podcast. You say, and help me out with this, Kevin. You say, those that have convinced those that don't that it's not enough, something like that, right? That's what's been going on here, right? Really, there is class warfare going on, but the powers that be got some people believing that it's brown versus white or black versus brown or black and brown versus white when it's really a class warfare that's really going on here.
I say it all the time. I say that racism is a subgenre of classism because
it's a function. It's a function of classism.
Absolutely. Because without racism, let's just say for whatever reason, Black people mind link up and suddenly we just decide to vacate the premises. Let's just say that that's a thing that happens one day. What's left is a country without a clearly identifiable exploited class. Because you have to have to survive under capitalism, you have to have a class of people who you can easily exploit to make sure that capitalism still works. And so if you remove the one that's been the main exploited class for generations, if we just somehow disappear and then all other minorities or racial minorities disappear, what you only have left is rich white people and broke and poor and white people in poverty. That's all you have left. Who do you think will then suddenly become public enemy number one? It's not going to be the poor people. Or it's not going to be the rich people. It's going to be the poor people.
Exactly.
Because now you are right. You are why you're poor, and you are. I need you to do what I need you to do so that I can stay rich. And so I have to convince you that you're the problem. I think that when we talk about racism, it is most definitely important to talk about classism when you're having that conversation, because it's driving everything. It's simply, I am rich and I understand that if I don't create division in other groups, they're going to figure out a way to get to me and my money. And I can't have that happen.
I want to add one perspective. One of the terrible consequences of the history of race in this country is that the worst, as I see it, the worst acts of violence, not the only ones, but the worst acts were committed by non-government militias, people of this sort, where the government looked the other way. Ku Klux Klan being the most obvious. And if you look at totalitarian countries, obviously Nazi Germany and others, there's always it's not just the military, the police, there's an element that the government kind of gives a dog whistle to, like, hey, we want you to go after these people, or people who are dissenters, whatever their race. And there's no question that releasing these 1,500, of which many of them were white supremacists, terrorist types like that. Trump did that for him to have kind of a little private army for him. There's no question about that. And their comments when they got out reflect this. I think I might have mentioned before the shaman or whatever they call him. First thing he said is, I'm going to get some mother effing guns. That's what he said. Yeah. And the heads of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, what did they say? They said, we're here to fight for Trump. This is since they got out, okay? And the reason I don't quite agree with the racial angle here is those guys are not out necessarily against blacks or any minority. They are there to fight for Trump.
It's both.
I can guarantee you, if any person of whatever race speaks out against Trump, ultimately you're going to see acts of violence by these people against those dissenters, regardless of whatever race they are.
I don't think you're wrong about anything other than the fact that, this is just my opinion, Phil, it's both. They're there for Trump and they're also racist at the same time.
No, they are. No, there's no question. As I said, they're largely white supremacists. And I'll tell you something else that's kind of interesting, that 1 out of 5 of the people who were pardoned were ex-military, some current military, but mostly ex-military. And another thing in these executive orders, this just came out today, is that they are discontinuing programs in the military to weed out extremists. They're getting rid of this. And they're also, by the way, getting rid of a department in the Pentagon that is designed to protect civilians in case of military action. All these point to the same thing. They point to the fact that Trump is going to use the military and he's going to use the private militias to do his will and to serve him. And that is really scary.
Yeah, it should be scary. You know, going back to DEI, I see this somebody, I think it's Daryl Carpenter, my old buddy Daryl Carpenter, sidebar, bro, we need to talk. You said some crazy-ish online. I need to talk to you. You and I should sit down and talk one day real soon. And I'm gracious. I'm open to the conversation. But he made a point about Costco. And, you know, I just been paying attention to these business entities who are being very vocal saying, nah, we're going to stand on business. We support DEI. And the wife and I have been talking about that. We are starting to shift where we spend our dollars to companies that share our values. I would say that I see a lot of people who are probably in most cases never started a business. They don't know nothing about a startup. They've never had a payroll and they're out here crapping on DEI. DEI will make any business stronger. It's not about excluding white people, to Kevin's point. It's about saying, look, the next time that we've got a critical position open, we're not going to overlook somebody because they're not white. That's all it is. We're just going to cast a wide net and try to get and see if who's out there. That's all it is. Now, there's companies that have quotas. They say, look, if they look at the books and realize that, you know, 99% of their middle managers are all white. And they say, hey, internally, we want to have a 5% quota. We think that we can meet this. We just feel like we've got a blind spot in our hiring process. So, you know, in the next 10 years, we want to see 5%.
Well, that's what you said is unconstitutional.
I don't think it is.
I'll guarantee you the Supreme Court.
I don't think it's unconstitutional at all.
If you say 5%, you're basically saying that they're going to discriminate to some degree to meet that goal. And I'm telling you right now, the Supreme Court, whether you agree or not, basically just the college admissions case, that was basically what the colleges were doing. A lot of colleges were, and it was Harvard and Penn or some other schools that were the defendants, and the Supreme Court said, no, it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, I don't see
the difference between that and what you're talking about.
And I don't see a difference between the Supreme Court being wrong and, let's say, the Dred Scott case, which when we look back now,
I didn't say that they're right. I'm just saying that's
the
law right now.
Just because the Supreme Court says something does not mean they're right. Now, it may be the law, but it doesn't mean that they're right.
I agree.
Yeah. Here's what I think. Here's what I think you're gonna do, and thank you for bringing up that point, Nathan, because I think a lot of the media attention and a lot of things that are going on right now are about, you know, the McDonald's and the Walmarts of the world and those who have said they're getting rid of DEI, but not enough has been focused on those businesses. You know, I heard Mark Morial of the Urban League talk about this, that there are plenty of businesses out there and companies out there who are reaffirming their commitment to DEI, and they're not shrinking in the face of some of these intimidation tactics. And I think, you know, even with some companies, even when you talk about the Walmarts or the McDonald's of the world, my suspicion is that they're not going to abandon diversity initiatives altogether. They're just not going to be public about it. I mean, it's the same thing. You can traffic in DEI at any corporation or any job without having it down on paper, or in any kind of employee handbook that this is an initiative that you're doing. You just need leadership that's committed to making sure that diversity is a part of their organization. You don't need some formal program or something written down in a binder somewhere to say that you're committed to it. And I think you're going to see a lot of companies continuing to do that because, quite frankly, that's how it worked for years the other way around. You know, there were companies and there were businesses that had exclusionary practices, right? Where they intentionally didn't hire people of color or minorities, and they didn't have any binder or any book. It was just understood that they were going to hook the people up that they wanted to hook up. And I think it's laughable that Trump wants to talk about we're returning to merit. And I think, you know, Phil touched on this, which makes my case about the BS nature of this best person for the job myth that we like to perpetuate in hiring practices. You can look at Trump's cabinet selections, and there's nothing about any of his cabinet selections that say any of these people he's picked is the best person for the job. It's who he wants. And that's what happens a lot of times in these corporate environments. They hire who they want to hire. You know, the NFL had to institute this Rooney Rule where you had to interview two minority candidates for coaching.
I think it's stupid, by the way. And
well,
I think
you know why? You know the reason why it is stupid, Phil. I'll agree with you. You know the
because
reason
it
why
means
it's stupid
nothing.
because NFL owners do what they want to do anyway, which is hire who they want to hire. It's always been that way.
A show to interview
they need a quota.
people. It makes no sense. It's stupid.
It doesn't make sense. No.
The intentions of it. Wait a minute. Let me finish it. The intentions
I think you're going to the same place I was going.
The intentions of it, Phil, are pure because what was happening is that a lot of minority coaches, a lot of coordinators, they weren't getting opportunities because Black coaches were not getting an opportunity to even interview for jobs. They weren't even interviewing qualified Black coaches. These all-white owners were not doing that. They were hiring predominantly and even recycling failed old white coaches, and Black coaches were not even getting an opportunity at the job. Now, I say this, if you believe that for most of the existence of the NFL, that only white men were qualified to coach or quarterback football.
Well, that's going back. That's not today.
No, but listen, it wasn't until the NFL.
The percentage? What is the percentage of Black
coaches? It wasn't until the NFL started instituting these types of policies that Black coaches starting to get opportunities. They were not getting opportunities before the NFL made it an intentional thing that you got to give some of these Black coaches a look. Before that, there was like one black head coach in the history of the NFL up until a certain point, right? And if you thought that was right or acceptable, or up until Warren Moon, you know, there were a Doug Williams, there were only like a couple of Black quarterbacks. You remember the myth was Blacks weren't smart enough to be quarterbacks. Right. That was a white supremacy mentality. And so anytime I hear a white person say, hey, if I walk onto a plane and I see a Black pilot, I'm automatically in fear of the possibility that this plane is not going to be safe. That ain't got nothing to do with DEI. That is a white supremacist, racist mentality. And so anytime you see a minority and your first thought is to question their qualifications, that is a racist mentality. And more white people have that than they're willing to admit, because they will question a minority's credentials before they will question somebody who looks like them.
Yeah, that rings true to me. But to be honest, don't Black people do that? Do you do that? Like, you ever gone to the job or you get to a new situation, you kind of paying attention and you see this white dude that might be the manager, it might be the supervisor, and you realize this person really shouldn't be the manager or the supervisor? We've all been there before.
All the time. I mean, and they see, and look, I have white colleagues, they see it too, because they talk about it. They talk about people who are in positions who shouldn't be there, who are unqualified, who even they feel like they're better than. And we all know how the game works. What is frustrating is people are not honest about it. They want to persist and continue to argue that this is not the way it is, because white people even see it themselves when they complain about somebody on their job who they feel like is getting a promotion or an opportunity that they don't merit. That's why I say this notion of a meritocracy, for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part, is BS. People hire who they want to hire. And sometimes that has nothing to do. It's great if the skill and qualification level go together, but they hire who they want to hire. And that is a subjective thing that has nothing to do with who is the best person for the job. Right.
Phil, Raven, you guys want to jump in?
I just want to say that I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with some of the current cases that are in course right now. I believe there was a story that came out maybe sometime last year about he was a white man who was suing this organization that was created to help Black female entrepreneurs, and he felt like the way that they were offering like services and offering opportunities to specifically Black women, he felt like it was discriminatory, and so he took it to court, and I think he might have won his case. And so I'm just curious to see how it's going to play out on the flip side. Like, we know how we feel about it because it's opening the door for us to be removed from opportunities, but we also have to again consider what it's going to look like on the flip side. How does this now affect some of the things that have been put forth to undo DEI, things that have been taken to court, and also when it comes to companies. I appreciate Costco, and I think it's been in Jerry's and Arizona Iced Tea. It's been a handful of companies who have said we are going to continue to use our DEI initiatives. But also, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine, I think that it's going to be an amazing opportunity for marginalized groups to truly put their money where their mouth is. We now have a responsibility to make sure that we actually do the research and that we actually are spending our dollars and we're actually giving our consumership to companies that value us as people. Where we can no longer afford, because if we have to do without DEI, if we have to do without those things, we also have to be better consumers. Not just I'm not going to be able to work here. Should I even shop here if I put in an application, they're not even going to look at it. We have to have that conversation when we spend our dollars. I am not going to support a company or an organization that if I put an application in and I have all the right qualifications, they won't even look at it because I filled out on my application that I was Black, or I filled out on my application that I was female or disabled, or whatever else protections come under DEI. So I think that truthfully, if we really want to be effective in making sure that we still receive fair chances and fair opportunities, we have to be a lot more targeted with our consumership. And I think that is something worth talking about, outside of all the other stuff that comes with it and the hurt feelings and all that good stuff. What are we prepared to do as consumers with our dollar?
I'd like to give a little different perspective and respectfully disagree with you guys in this respect. You are defining DEI as probably what we would all agree with, which is basically casting a wider net, okay, as Kevin and others have put it. But the problem is that is your definition, and if that was it, but others define it differently. I can remember when I was on city council, I think John Shirey, I think it was our city manager, and they would drag him and sometimes some department heads, and you'd have 4 or 5 members of council that would just excoriate this guy. Why aren't there more Black employees? Why not? I mean, huge. It wasn't a question of, oh, you got to cast a wider net. They didn't care about that. They wanted more, okay? And I will guarantee you, okay, when John Shirey had to hire somebody, I can guarantee you that was in the back of his mind, okay? He wasn't just, oh, let's cast a wider net. He's saying, I got to hire this race or this gender to satisfy these people. And can I just say something quick to finish up? Then you can.
Absolutely. Now jump in.
Okay. Bill Maher had a very interesting commentary at the end of his show last week. And, you know, he's a kind of a liberal guy. And he was showing I think it's the fire chief of either Palisades or LA, and the fact that she is a lesbian. Okay. And he goes, hey, I don't care if she's a lesbian or not. I just want the best person to run the fire department. And he pulled up her announcement when, I don't know, at some point in the past before the fires, about what are the goals of the fire department, okay, in this fire department. And almost the whole thing from top to bottom was, that's what they're saying, this is our job. Diversity and inclusion. And then at the bottom it said, and we want to be able to compete or with other fire departments at a high level or something. But the point is that wasn't the main thing. Her main point was diversity and inclusion. And I think Bill Maher made an excellent point, which is if that's your main goal, okay, then you're out of whack. Because the main goal of a fire department should be to put out fires, and we can apply that to city government or just about anything.
Well, I would say, again, not being there with the example that you gave, I can't necessarily argue any of the particular tenets you brought up, but I will say that I don't think that that's an unfair question that you said that was asked. I don't think it's unfair. It's really
about Bill Maher or the thing on city council.
The thing on city council, like
there was a question. It wasn't really a question.
Well, that's what you said it was. You said it was a question.
They might have. Maybe it was a technically a question, but it was
okay. Well, let's go with it then.
It was pressure. Let's go with
it then, Phil. It's a question.
Strong pressure. It was strong pressure. That's what.
But that's a fair question. Like, especially if you're getting government money, right? You're working with the city, and black people and all kind of people pay into that taxpayer pot. I don't think it's an unfair question to ask. Like, if you look at your fire department and it's 99.9% white.
That wasn't the issue.
I know, but I'm just saying hypothetically.
It didn't matter what the percentage was. That was the politics. It didn't matter what the percentage
I'm just saying hypothetically, just so I can make this point and tell me what you think. So if you've got a fire department, right, just for the sake of example, and you've got city council members asking, well, why don't you have more black people that work for this fire department? That's not an unfair question. What they're trying to do is to get you to see that perhaps in your hiring processes, you've got a blind spot. I would think that any organization, if they look at their org chart or their hierarchy of different jobs and they realize that they don't have any diversity, their question should be, why? Why are we not hiring other people? That's the basis of what DEI work is really all about.
Yeah, let me just jump in here in terms of what Phil said, and he wanted to talk about that being about the politics. So let's go with that argument. If a politician is bringing up an issue, it's most likely an issue that has bubbled up from the community. So I would probably venture to guess if you had black members on council who were making an issue about the numbers in the police or the fire department, it probably was coming up from the community.
Oh, so you're saying Donald Trump takes his stands because of what bubbles up, not what he wants to do.
We're not even talking about Donald Trump. I mean, look, I'm not even going to have a conversation with you about logical thought with Donald Trump. But if I can finish my point,
yeah, go ahead.
It probably was bubbling up from the community, from people who are saying, "Hey, I've been in this process. I've applied to be a firefighter. I've applied to be on the police department. Couldn't get a job." And it probably was in such numbers that it got to somebody at city council who said, it's my job because this constituency likely elected me to council and I got to be accountable to them. So now I'm going to go ask the city manager, perhaps why these people who are applying for jobs are not getting opportunities. And so that's a damn good question that the city manager ought to be answering. I'm going to give you an example from my own personal experience, just to sort of talk about the subjective nature of hiring and blind spots and things of that nature. I won't say where it was and at what point in my career it was, but at one point in time, I was applying for a position and I made it to the finalists, and it was me and another white gentleman. He was qualified. I was qualified. We were both good. We made it down to the end. He got the job. I wasn't mad about it. So when I asked the person who hired, who was doing the hiring, I said, hey, look, I just want to know for my own personal development so that I can get better, so that the next time an opportunity comes up, where did I fall short in the interview process? Tell me what I need to work on so that the next time the job comes up, I can be working on that and I'll be more prepared. So maybe next time I'll land the job. And the guy looked me in the face, who was white as well. And he said, you know what? He said, Kevin, you were great. There really wasn't anything wrong with you. You know, you would have done a great job. We thought we were just more comfortable with the guy that they hired. Now, that could have meant anything. More comfortable could have meant anything. It's very vague. I don't know what it meant. I don't know what about him made them more comfortable with me or than me. But I feel like a lot of times minorities feel that when somebody on the other side of that hiring desk does not look like us, what comfortable means for them is somebody they can relate to more.
I got a personal story. Can I share mine?
And so we often are the ones that lose out. And so going back to the NFL head coaching thing, this is one of the things that black coaches in the NFL often talked about, is that owners hire guys that they are more comfortable with. And who are they going to be more comfortable with? A black man or woman who they have basically no kind of common experience with, no type of real connection or maybe even relationship on any level.
Don't you think they want to win? Do you think they want to win? Don't you think they want to win?
Well, ask Jerry Jones that.
Well,
As Jerry Jones,
can I
Dallas
share my
Cowboy
story?
owner.
Can I share my story?
I'm gonna just be quick. I promise, Phil. I'm gonna let you share your story. I'm gonna be quick. But I think that when we have these conversations, as typical of any conversation about racism or white supremacy that you have with your white counterparts, I think we start from a different starting point when we have these conversations, which is obvious, but also I think that it's worth pointing out just so that people like Phil understand. Y'all have painted yourself into a corner, and not you specifically. I'm speaking generally, but your ancestors have painted themselves and you as a product of it into a corner, because now as a minority, I don't have a choice but to question the things that you say and do to me, because at one point in time you were very out and open and blatant about the things that you felt and thought about people who look like me. I've spent generations. I have generational trauma from the things that I know to be true about how your ancestors felt and the things that they did to people who look like me. And so in that way, they've painted you all into a corner that now we do have to have things put in place where you might have to explain what you mean by what does that mean to be more comfortable with somebody who looks like you, or what is that like. There are certain things that as a minority, I don't have a choice but to consider, because for generations in this very same country that we both live in, there's been the experience there. It's like PTSD. I have to ask questions. I have to consider, is this racial? Because that's the history of the country. It would be naive of me to make the assumption that you just simply, there's just simply no other reason. Maybe I just wasn't as qualified. Well, no, I know I'm qualified for this job. I'm asking you, in Kevin's story, I'm asking you, well, what is it? What about my qualifications don't match up with what you're looking for? And then the response is, well, we were just more comfortable with so and so. You could be your meaning behind that could be very innocent. It could just mean that you've had a better vibe with so and so. But because I know the history of this country and how things have been before, I have to think to myself, as a minority, I don't have a choice. I have to think, was that racial? Was that a subtle way of saying that he just don't feel as comfortable with Black people? And if that is the case, why is that?
Well,
why are you so uncomfortable with me? What have I done to you historically that would make you uncomfortable? I should be the one uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, I'll just respond to what Raven said about, and I know she wasn't saying it in a antagonistic way. I don't mind, but you referred to my ancestors, okay? And I would just say,
or people who look like you ancestrally.
Let me finish. Don't paint too broad a brush. I've already shared, and I'm not trying to sound noble or my family noble, but I've shared on this show before that at least when I grew up, and in a pretty probably upper middle class family, and my parents, as I've said before, they were very, very aware and extremely angry about discrimination, particularly against Blacks, but whether it's Blacks, Jews, whatever. And I can tell you this: if I ever, which I didn't, I don't think, if I ever said something that would be racist, or if I did racist or dry, believe me, my parents would have been all over me. So I'm just saying, don't paint too broad a brush. Now, as far as my own story goes, real quick, when I was in the prosecutor's office, the way promotions, you'd start the juvenile, then you get promoted to, they call it the misdemeanor or municipal, and then you get to the felony division where everybody wanted to go. That was the action, all right? And it was totally based on right or wrong on seniority, meaning whoever was in the office earlier just went up. It was literally that every time. Well, anyway, I spent 2 years in municipal, and it was not the most. I wasn't exactly prosecuting serial killers there. Let's just put it that way. And I was the next one up. Okay. Well, a female who was a good friend of mine, and she's actually still a friend and a judge now, but she walked into me. She said, "Phil, I don't know what to say, but they just promoted me." And she was almost like apologetic. I don't understand why. So I went to the prosecutor, who, by the way, has since passed away. So I'm not going to say his name, but it's not like I'm talking about anybody who's alive. And I just kind of said, "Hey, why wasn't I moved up?" And he goes to me, "Phil, I had to appoint a woman." That's what he said to me. I had to appoint a woman. Now, I'm not saying that's a broad, always happens, but I'm just saying, at least for me, as responding to what Kevin's story was, in my case, you could say I was discriminated against, okay, because there was nothing subjective about these promotions up to that point. It was just whoever was in the office longer.
You know what?
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that again. I mean, thank you for that story, Phil. And I'll say that if that indeed was the way that it happened, that wasn't right in terms of what happened to you. If the practice had been, which I'm not even saying that's a good practice, that just simply based on seniority, you are automatically the next person in line. Again, I say, people want to point to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but there are all sorts of things that are done in hiring practice that have nothing to do with the best person for the job. Promoting somebody just because they're the most senior person in a department, they could be senior, but they could not be the best person in the department, that best person for the job. Just because you've been there longer doesn't mean that you're
I'm
best.
just saying that was the policy.
No, I get what you're saying, but I'm just making the point that there are all sorts of things that have nothing to do with merit or best person for the job that determines hiring. Seniority. Why is who's to say that seniority is the best determiner of who should get a promotion? Why is seniority seen as any better a determiner than diversity, equity, or inclusion? Because in some way we have it in our mind that just because you've been there a while, that you may be better than the hot young Turk coming up, or somebody who is more creative and who is more with the time, and maybe you old and outdated and you can't adapt the department in a way because you've been there for so long. You stuck in your ways, so you may not be the best person to move the department forward. So who says seniority is any more fair or unfair than diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we make excuses for all of these other factors. Legacy for colleges and universities, they want to talk about this diversity, equity, and inclusion in terms of college admissions. But is it fair that I should be able to get automatic admission to a college or university because my dad or my great grandfather or somebody else went there? Legacy has nothing to do with merit,
especially considering America's racist history.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't have any problem with those sorts of things. And those are the sorts of things that Donald Trump would defend. You know why? Because they defend people who look like him. Legacy.
At the end of the day, if we truly want to believe what is being said by people who are against DEI, that companies should be hiring people based off of merit alone, based off of their worth as an employee, you might want to rethink then why nepotism is a thing. We can all sit here and agree that nepotism is a thing. Mm-hmm. Through nepotism, somebody can be hired simply based on a relationship, not off of credentials, not off of seniority, not off of anything that would actually help this country move any further into the profitable future. Nepotism is a thing. I think it's funny that we have so many conversations about DEI and EEO, but we never quite touch that nepotism conversation because we all know that most companies and corporations don't give a damn about who's actually qualified as long as I like this relationship. I like having you here because I like you as a person, or because you're related to so-and-so, or because you're married to so-and-so, or because we play golf on Saturdays. We know companies have a tendency to hire and use those hiring practices. So I think it's ironic that the number one complaint is, why do they get to have the job if just because they're a woman, or why do they get to have the job just because they're black or they're gay or whatever? I think a better question is, why are you giving people jobs who are not qualified, but because so-and-so is married to your sister, he gets to have this job?
Well, I will say this, and I don't think I'm defending Donald Trump here, but I would guarantee you that if there was a white guy who had spoken out against him and his policies, if they have to decide on hiring, and there's a black guy or a black woman or whatever, okay, who was kissing his rear end and had always been, I'll guarantee you who he's going to choose, and it's not the white guy. Now, that doesn't say as I'm not going to, we all know that he uses dog whistles to play on those kind of racial fears in his base, and did that throughout this campaign. But to his, if you want credit, I don't know if I'd call it credit, to him, loyalty is everything. That transcends race, gender.
In that same loyalty, Phil, in that same loyalty, he also knows where the money lies. He knows that the money lies with white supremacy. And so at the end of the day, yeah, he's going to do some self-serving stuff, but he's never going to make a decision that's going to go.
Why do you say?
He's never going to go against his benefactor. And his benefactor right now is white supremacy.
I get the fact that his base, there's definitely a segment of his base, maybe a majority, okay, that are basically anti-black, et cetera, et cetera. I get that, but that's votes and support. Where do you mean money? Where's the money? Where do you mean when
political cachet?
Supports racism.
He gets political capital out of it, like playing the race card, like making working class white people feel
that's
like.
That's what Raven said. No.
That's exactly what she said.
He plays the race.
What I said.
Exactly what she said.
His benefactor right now in all things politics and financial is white supremacy, or it is somebody who holds white supremacist attitudes.
Those are his benefactors right now. What you're saying, I thought what you were saying is his money, which is coming from all these tech guys and others, that these people who are giving money to him, that they want racist policies. I don't necessarily see that.
The MAGA crowd responds to this, Phil. Look, Trump has been doing this since 2016. He hit the scene with a birther strategy, a racist strategy, and he's getting political capital off of it. As I told you,
I don't deny that.
White people are. Let me.
You need a little history. To help try to understand what Raven and Nathan are saying.
I'm about to give it to him. Let me finish. And I've said it before, which is white people have felt as if the American dream has overlooked them. Trump comes along and tells you that the reason why the American dream overlooked you is because they're too focused on DEI.
I don't disagree at all. What I thought, Raven, I don't disagree with that. What I thought Raven was saying and was, I thought she was talking about not the fact that his supporters are suffering as financially as the middle class shrinks, and so he plays on that and plays on the race and immigrant. No question about that. I thought what Raven was saying, and if she wasn't, was that the people who donate to him do it, and they want racist policies. And
I believe you cleaned that up already.
They may not want racist policies, Phil, but what they want is the racial and cultural divisions that keep the attention off of what they're doing. And this is where the history lesson that I was going to.
What do you mean? Like, give me an example. Like, you talking about Elon Musk?
I'm going to give you a historical example and how it plays today. So, at one point in time in history, white people in this country were in slavery too. You had white slaves and you had black slaves, and many times they worked together on the same plantations. Well, at one point in time in history, there was something that we had that was called a slave revolt, where the black slaves and the white slaves figured out, hey, if we come together on this, we can go against and attack the rich plantation owners, because the white people kind of recognize, hey, we're in the same boat as these poor black slaves. We have a common interest. And so when the slave plantation owners saw the power of the black slaves and the white slaves together and the threat that they posed, what they did is that when the white slaves, they gave the white slaves an out. They could get their way, they could work their way out of slavery, get out of slavery. And then they allowed those same white slaves who were next to their black slaves to then turn around and even own those slaves. And that's when they created this issue of not blackness, but whiteness. This notion that whiteness was the one thing that even if you were poor and even if you were a former slave, it was something that you had over black people, was your whiteness. And that is something that whites at the upper level of the society created, because they understood that if poor white folks who were in the same position as the slaves recognized that and they bonded together, they were a threat to them. So fast forward to 2025. When you think about Trump's MAGA base and this whole notion of immigrants, and
I was talking about his financial base, not MAGA base, and I may have misunderstood what
his financial base benefits from it, Phil. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They benefit from us
How does Elon Musk benefit
and
from
poor
racial?
blacks not coming together? It goes to what Raven was saying about maintaining that lower class that is malleable, that you need to prop up the capitalistic system. It's all about keeping poor whites with a feeling that they're superior to black people, no matter how much I might have. No matter how successful I might be, or how much I might have, the poorest white guy would not want to trade positions with me. He would rather be resentful of me and what I have than trade places. And that is a creation.
What?
How does Elon Musk?
It benefits Elon Musk. I'm gonna answer your question, Phil.
Ask the question, then I'll be quiet. You're suggesting that, and I have no respect for these guys, but these guys like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and the others, okay? You're saying it, just so I'm clear, you're saying that they benefit from racial division, and I'm saying how? I don't see that.
They benefit because, as it stands, Elon Musk has just been given a very high level position in American government under the administration of Donald Trump, who has been put in that place by the MAGA base. He benefits. He now has a level of power that he would never have had access to if he did not align himself with Donald Trump and his MAGA base. He now has, he is making decisions on behalf of an entire country he was never even born in.
Yeah.
He is making financial decisions.
No, I don't disagree with that, but
why
does it benefit him if there's racial division?
What do you mean, how does it benefit him? He now has his pocket. He now has the presidency in his pocket. He now has the presidency in his pocket.
It benefits him.
How does it benefit him?
Because Phil, you know how
racial division. I don't see it.
Phil, you know how it benefits him? It benefits him because it keeps the general public's eye off of what he's doing. It keeps people from recognizing that the regulations that he does not want on the things that he's doing, that his desire to get rid of regulations is not for you and me, it's for him so that he can profit. Regulations are meant and designed to protect the people. He's not interested in the people. And so how do you get the eye? Like Nathan says all the time, you got to show people who the villain is. And I've said this many times, that for poor people in this country, the villains are greedy CEOs. They're not immigrants. They're not these people who are taking your jobs. They're the
people. Okay. All right. You're saying it's a scapegoating thing. Okay. I'll buy that. I'll accept that.
Can I build off your point? Because I thought it was a great point you made there.
Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. Oh, you're talking about him?
No, you make great points, Phil. Hey, Phil, you make great points too. I want to just build on something Kevin said.
Don't patronize me, Nathan.
No. If I felt otherwise, I wouldn't say it. Trust me, bro. I don't need to patronize you at all. But Keith Boykin, who worked in the Obama administration, he's openly homosexual, just so for the point of that. But he wrote a couple of books, some really good stuff. He's now started a series of videos. You can find him on Instagram and Facebook. He put out a video a couple of weeks ago when he talked about why is it you have working class white people that essentially have voted against their best interests. And the crux of it is this, is that at the end of the day, they're white. And Trump is white, and they believe that no matter what he might do, crazy or otherwise, he's still going to protect the real estate of whiteness. And there's a lot of white people that don't want to believe that, but that is inherently true. That's why they can. Let me finish and I'll land and give you the plane. Let me land it first before you take off. So they vote for Trump because, and they say things like, well, I don't agree with this and I don't agree with that. And that sounds crazy. They do it because at the end of the day, they feel as if he's going to protect their white position in this country. And so look at what he's doing right now. He's attacking DEI. If you go to Fox News, if you go to their Instagram or social media channels, what are they saying? Hey, promises made, promises kept. Now, he ain't talking about grocery prices. He ain't doing nothing about inflation, but he is preserving the real estate of whiteness in the minds of a lot of white people, and they're cool with it.
But you just said it's against their interests, so he's really not doing that.
Well, right? The policies that he is going to put in place, like he did before, like tax cuts for the rich, like deregulations, are going to hit their communities just as hard as everybody else. They don't benefit from that.
It's in their interest to support him.
But no, it really isn't in terms of policy, but it is in terms of preserving whiteness. making them feel as if white people at the end of the day are not going to take a back seat to anybody else.
Even if it's not
So
them,
what Phil
even
is
if it's
missing
not
is the
them
cultural.
personally.
Yeah, what Phil is missing is the cultural dog. This is the connection he's not making. Is that the cultural dog whistles that Trump uses through MAGA? That's the distraction. That is the thing that appeals to his base, that gets them to vote against their best interests. They care more about those cultural things because he has convinced them that the issue with your problems in life are DEI, are immigrants. That's why you're not getting the job.
That's
why you're not getting the opportunities. As opposed to these greedy CEOs who are moving jobs overseas, who are cutting thousands of jobs, but taking these bonuses and doing these stock buybacks, like all of these things that you see greedy CEOs doing. And what do people turn around and do? They don't blame them. They blame the government, or they blame somebody else.
The liberals.
Nobody is making these businesses make these cuts. These guys are making money hand over fist. They're just greedy.
Now,
they're just greedy.
When Kamala Harris said, you know what, part of this whole inflation thing, rising prices, is price gouging, right? That's real. People didn't want to hear that. You know,
I don't buy that. I don't buy that myself.
Of course they did. It doesn't sound as sexy as Democrats want to put men in the bathroom, right? So it's all a game. And the game is to get you to vote for me by any cost. And Trump was good at that. With 77 million people, it worked.
I'm going to rob you blind, but I'm going to distract you from me robbing you blind by talking about whether or not it's appropriate for a trans person to use a specific bathroom. I'm going to distract you from robbing you blind by questioning whether or not Black people actually deserve to be put in these positions that they are qualified for. Right. But you could make your way into that position because, I don't know, but Black people there, so do something. Like it's misdirection at its finest. It is what we've been talking about, classism. It is racism, as I say all the time, is a function, as Nathan called it, but I call it a subgenre of classism. Racism actually isn't a thing. It's merely a concept. It's merely an idea. Racism isn't a thing. There's no logical reason why you should believe that your skin tone makes you better than me. It makes no logical sense. But when you have a demographic of people who are suffering and they are trying to find somebody to blame for their suffering, it is very easy. It's one of the easiest things in the world to do, to create a relationship where we relate to each other. And so if I say something that relates to you, you'll believe me if I tell you some crap. You'll believe me if I tell you a lie, because it'll make you feel good. And so it makes a lot of people, white people don't want to say this out loud and don't want to admit this to themselves, but it makes a lot of white people feel good to see somebody who looks like them in positions of power, even if they're not qualified to do so. And to have those same people succeed, even if I never do, because you look like me. And because you look like me, I can believe that possibly someday I might just be the next Elon Musk. I might just be the next Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or whatever you want to call it. It's easier to believe the lie than it is to deal with the truth of the matter, which is it's people who look like me who are robbing me blind right now.
Yeah. To circle back to DEI, and that's where we started. And then after this point, unless you guys have any points, we'll move on to another topic. But I read, and I don't know if it's true or not, and I think these statistics come from a story I pulled from back in 2019. So it's a few years older. Things might have changed a little bit or not. But I read that 70% of most open jobs aren't even posted. So what that tells you is that it's all relationships. People, and that's part of DEI. Part of DEI is post a job. Just post a job. Don't just fill it internally. Post a job so we can see who's out there. Now, is that a quota? Who's got a problem with that? Because to this point, most jobs have been filled by people that you know. To Kevin's point, hey, you know somebody? Right? I've been asked, you know somebody? That's the first thing that employers do. They go to somebody that they know, typically somebody already on the job, and they ask them, do you know somebody? Well, when you do that and you don't put it out to the public, you're basically denying the public, somebody out there that could be qualified, a chance to even apply for the job.
Yeah.
And when you take in the fact that we live in a very segregated society, And when you talk about the racial hierarchy, meaning that most white people are in positions of hiring, what does that tell you? That's the reason why you get these positions, these organizations where they have no diversity. And in their minds and hearts, they may not be racist. They may not be trying to exclude people, but they've got a blind spot. And that's one of the things that DEI is trying to deal with, the blind spot in these majority led and majority owned businesses and organizations when it comes to diversifying their workplace.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the reality is that most companies, most corporations, most businesses have very poor hiring practices. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Like how they go about, recruiting, finding, and hiring employees is bad. And that's part of the conversation that gets left out whenever we talk about this. That's a huge part of this discussion, that when you have a lot of bad hiring practices to begin with, when jobs are not posted, when it's like, hey, who do you know? When you don't have diversity, when you don't have diverse people in positions to hire in the first place, you create, this critical mass of just crap that puts us in the situation where we are. And I think, there's probably some larger conversation that needs to be had about, hey, look, how do we really work on trying to come up with hiring practices that can be, the best standards of best practices that gets everybody the results that we're looking for, so that we don't have to generate or create. Like, the reason why we have these extra ancillary programs to begin with is because there was something messed up with the original process to begin with that wasn't producing fair results. And look, I think we can all agree, everybody listening and everybody on this podcast can agree. Hey, I just want a fair shot. Give me the opportunity to know about it. Give me the opportunity to compete and participate fairly, and give me a fair shot that is not going to be determined based on some subjective factor that you have, that's going to give me an equal opportunity to get this position, whatever it is. I think everybody can be in agreement on that. The problem with it is it hasn't been that way historically. It still struggles to get to that place today of fairness, right? I think somebody in the chat said that the biggest hang up that white people have with DEI is the equity, right? The equity, this notion of just wanting everything to be sort of like 50-50 or equal, that there are equal numbers of blacks as there are whites. I don't even think that, I don't know. I don't have the dictionary in front of me to give you the technical definition of what equity is, but I don't think the intention of DEI programs is to say it's got to be 50-50 workplaces, or anything like that. I don't think that's the intention. I think that's how some people paint that. But I think it's all about access, opportunity, and having a fair shake. Fairness is the word. When I think about DEI, that's what I think about. I think about fairness and equal opportunity, right?
Well,
That's not the same thing as saying, hey, we're all going to get the job, but we're all going to go through the same process and be judged in the exact same way. Hey, may the best man win. I think we can all live with that. But what we can't live with is,
Kevin, equity can mean just simply posting a job. Just means that we're going to give people who don't work here a chance to apply to the job, just like the people that work here. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And, you got bad actors out there like Trump and JD Vance and a lot of these conservatives who, instead of approaching this with a measure of maturity, they're using it to whip white people into a frenzy, making them feel like you're losing something. It's not about that. It's just about saying, look, we might have a blind spot in our hiring. When we look at our workplace and we look at our management and we look at our C-suite, we don't see a lot of diversity. Why not? Okay, well, maybe we've got a blind spot.
I think you guys are a little off on the racial side in this sense. There were, as I understand it, in this election, Trump got a lot more black votes and Hispanic votes than he had before. Okay,
got about 11-12%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I think he was doing what you've all said, and I agree. He's scapegoating. He's showing you the shiny object here, which is, let's take immigrants. They're the ones to blame. Okay, they're the ones taking your jobs. Okay,
there are black people who feel that way.
Exactly. My point is, it isn't just a racial thing. Okay, it's a scapegoating thing, and the fact that blacks and Hispanics voted for him in increased numbers should just say that it isn't like, oh, I'm just going to help white people and that's the thing. No, he's scapegoating a particular group, and he's using black people, white people, Hispanic. He's
but
using
the reason
them.
he's able to scapegoat that particular group is racism. The reason that group is able to be scapegoated is because of things like racism and xenophobia.
Yeah,
that's what those attitudes come from.
I'll just tell you this: the KKK will use gullible black people, and they've even talked about it. Even though they don't want to see nothing good for black people.
I don't think we're disagreeing.
If they can use black people against other black people or other minorities, they will use that because it furthers their mission. So it's no different with Donald Trump. So simply saying that he's been able to court and bring some black men over to his side, and so suddenly that doesn't mean race is not an issue. No, that's even better. If I can bring people who I'm trying to bring down over to my side and get them to argue against the same people I want, that's even better, because now I'm getting help from a group that I may actually be trying to hurt, and they're helping me do it. So
I'm just saying
he's able to court and bring some people over to that side doesn't necessarily mean that it's still not racism.
Yeah, I hear you feel that too. You're right. It's scapegoating too, but I stand with
as you mentioned, and liberals. He uses liberals as scapegoats also, which is
absolutely.
So what I'm saying is, it's not as simple as he's pitting whites against blacks. It's scapegoating. It's taking a vulnerable group, okay, and making them the scapegoat, as dictators throughout history have done.
It's all of that.
On
it's
the
all
basis of racism.
Yeah, it's all of the above. But let's move on here to another topic and kind of step away from the heavy politics. And of course, this past week we saw the inauguration of Donald Trump, but and it was also on MLK Day, Martin Luther King's nationally recognized holiday. And something happened on social media. I'm not saying this is the biggest thing, but it could be, a source for some interesting conversation. But the daughter of Martin Luther King, Bernice King, she called out a very famous rapper named Sexy Red. That's Sexy Red right there in red on the right. Apparently, Sexy Red on her Instagram page, she posted 2 images, but this is one image. This is an AI generated image that one of her followers sent to her, and she reposted it. Well, that didn't go too good, because Bernice King, who has a history of doing these kind of things, and rightly so, she should be the one of the gatekeepers of her father's image. I have no issue with that. And she let her voice be heard. She said that basically, as you can read for yourself, she said, quote, "This is intentionally distasteful, dishonoring, deplorable, and disrespectful to my family and my father, who is not here to respond himself because he was assassinated for working for your civil and human rights and to end war and poverty." So she had a lot of strong feelings about the fact that Sexy Red had posted this. Now, to her credit, Sexy Red immediately took it down and apologized, saying that she didn't mean to be disrespectful at all. And a lot of people have been talking about this, and I want to get your thoughts. I mean, do you think that this is disrespectful to the image of Martin Luther King?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that, when you think about someone who is as revered as a historical figure as MLK is, to sort of kind of caricature him, or not to take to put him in compromising positions and images and things of that nature that can somehow kind of take away from the honor and the seriousness of what he did, I think is not something that we should do. I mean, look, I get we live in a TikTok, IG, social media, meme society now, where this sort of thing happens on the regular. And I don't think the people, whoever the person who did this in Sexy Red by reposting it, probably had disrespectful intent in mind when they did it. But once it was drawn to her attention, she could see, sometimes, sometimes we do that. We can say and do things that in the moment when we do it, we're not thinking about it. But then when somebody draws it to our attention, we're like, yeah, I could kind of see where somebody would get that. And I could kind of see where that was wrong. So I'll give her credit for, not bucking back and resisting, but acknowledging that it was kind of a mistake to do that.
Any thoughts?
Yes. So I talked about this on my show on Saturday, or maybe it was one of these days this week that I feel differently. I can't remember, but I did talk about this. And I for me, it was one of those things where we saw a rift between the generations in real time, and I think that it's beautiful how it turned out. I will say that I think that the initial reaction, while I understand it, I don't necessarily agree that it was handled the right way. Because the way that I had to look at it is this. I talk about my grandmother, Della Jo, all the time. She raised me. She is basically my mama. And so if somebody start making AI pictures of Della Jo and putting her in strange places with strange people, or putting her or how people have been doing to Martin Luther King Jr. for decades now, using his quotes out of context to further their points and all those different kinds of things, kind of taking away from his truth and his legacy. Yes, I will very much so feel upset. I will very much so want to, go forth and put forth some correction. And I don't like the way that you're using Della Jo's likeness like this. She did not represent this. She would not have appreciated this. And if she, God forbid, she's no longer with us. And so for you to even engage with her likeness in this way without her being able to speak for herself is distasteful. I just think that should have been said privately. I think that it was a knee-jerk reaction. And I think that her knee-jerk reaction is what fostered some of the conversation that happened online when this was done. A lot of conversation that happened after Bernice King came forward and said this was about how people feel about Sexy Red as a person. This girl did something that was completely unintentionally disrespectful. When she posted these pictures, it was not with the intention of being disrespectful to his likeness. That was never her intent. But because of the response to her posting it, people came out of the woodwork calling Sexy Red all kinds of names, dehumanizing her, disrespecting her, just off of her posting this picture in a very innocent way. And I think that some of that has to do with some of the things that Bernice King said in her original response to it, which is this is intentionally distasteful and dishonoring and all these things. It wasn't intentional. So I think that you have to be careful when you are doling out some correction. You got to be careful and strategic about how you do that. What I think would have been a better way to do that was to reach out to Sexy Red individually and let her know, hey, I am the daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and I just want you to understand that I'm not sure if your intent was to be disrespectful or not, but I perceive it as his daughter and as somebody who is protective of his legacy as disrespectful. And Sexy Red, as we saw, she would not have had any problem taking a picture down and maybe even coming out and saying and clarifying, hey, I posted this picture earlier on my social media and I just spoke with Bernice King who shared with me that she felt like my father's legacy was disrespected. And so I just want to put out a public apology to make sure that her and her family and his family understand it was never my intention to be disrespectful. And I appreciate her coming to me as a woman to correct me in this way. And I think that would have been, so just personally, I would have preferred to be handled in that manner, because the way that it was handled, it opened the floodgates for people to say all kind of disrespectful and demeaning things about a Sexy Red. And I think that at the end of the day, if you care about Black people the way that you say you care about Black people, you care about all of them, not just the ones who fit into the picture of pleasantness and respectability that you have for yourself. It's kind of similar to that conversation we were having about the homeless when the guy I can't even remember his name, but the councilman, when he said what he said about homeless people, it was dehumanizing, it was disrespectful, and it removed a level of humanity from homeless people just by him saying what he said. I don't think that sometimes, and it's just me being a young, quote unquote, disrespectful millennial, I don't know if sometimes our elders understand that the way that you deliver your correction, it is it is a jab at me. It is a jab at my dignity. It is a jab at who I am as a person. And you so fired up and so passionate about your correction of me, you have not stopped to check your heart posture before you said what you said to me. And so now I have a decision to make. Do I overlook your disrespect of me to take your correction, or what's most prominent and pertinent and what most people tend to do? Do I address your disrespect of me first before I deal with your correction? Luckily enough, Sexy Red was understanding enough to not even kind of comment on the comments that were being thrown her way. And she just took Bernice King, you know, and what she said and respected the whole legacy part of it. But you would have never known that until after the fact, when Bernice King had to come back and double back because she kept seeing people say stuff about Sexy Red. That wasn't the only thing she said. She had to come back and then kind of say, hey, I don't like what y'all saying that I'm saying to this girl. I don't think that she's a bad person. I don't think that she's ghetto. I don't think that she's trash. I just think that she did something and without realizing what she did. And I checked her. But I think you would have avoided that whole conversation if you would have came to her woman to woman and said, hey, baby, I don't know whether or not you meant it this way, but this is how I am perceiving it as a protector of his legacy. And I would prefer for you not to do this. And then we could have had it could have been a whole different situation where we don't have to then call into question whether or not we should respect Sexy Red. Why not?
Yeah.
So I love Raven's take because it does show again the separation of generations and even between the generation between me and Raven. I disagree with her.
Yeah, I just got to ask, you're not talking about me when you say you're elders, Raven. I hope. I'm very sensitive. There's not going to be
anybody who's older than me. You my elder.
I don't want to see any age discrimination on this podcast. Let me state that right now. Sorry to interrupt you.
This is a DEI podcast, and older people
I'm the DEI on this podcast.
You are the DEI.
Anybody can get it. Anybody can get it. This is a DEI podcast.
So the only problem I have with Raven's argument is her premise of it wouldn't have become this if Bernice King hadn't responded in such a way. No, it wouldn't have come to this if Sexy Red had not posted the image to begin with. So you have to start there. So whatever happens after Sexy Red posts this image, she's largely brought on herself, because Bernice King didn't wake up that morning asking to see that meme, asking to see, you know, her father's image disrespected. And I think like pulling her off to the
morning and decide I'm gonna disrespect MLK today. She didn't make that decision.
Sure, but you got to think. But again, Raven, this is where I'm at with personal responsibility. That's why in these days you got to think before you do things. And I'm not saying anybody is beyond doing something stupid. We've all done it. But at the end of the day, you got to take personal responsibility and think about what you're doing before you do it. So ask somebody, Sexy Red, instead of just getting something that somebody sent you and reposting it. Maybe you should have some people around you that are consulting you about what you are when you are at that high profile, what you are putting out there before you're putting it out there. The other thing that I would say is that pulling her off to the side. If I'm Bernice King, yeah, that's nice, and that may be one way to do it. But certainly the way she handled it, send a message to anybody else who thinking about going and doing exactly what Sexy Red is saying by putting her on blast, is putting everybody else on notice who thinking about doing that.
So now Sexy Red has to be the scapegoat of Bernice King.
Sometimes that's the way it goes. She didn't have to be, but
for people who do things like this. I don't think that's fair. I think what would have been more appropriate is her coming to her in private.
She didn't have to be the example, but she brought that on herself. I think
that it would have been a lot more effective to go to Sexy Red privately, and then
effective for who?
For everybody involved, for everybody watching.
I think Bernice King got exactly what she wanted. She let them know. Well, she let anybody else know that if you come posting intentionally or otherwise, any images that disrespect my pops, I'm coming for you. I think that was part of the intention behind it.
But why not just say that? If this has been a long-standing issue for Bernice King of people using his likeness, why wait to dump all of that frustration on one particular person who didn't even do it intentionally in the first place?
Sometimes
it might have been more effective. It might have been a more effective message without all of the. Again, this is what I'm talking about. It's heart posture for me. I get I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying, Kevin, other than the unwillingness to check your heart posture before you try to correct somebody. And maybe this is just me and where I am, spiritually. When I do things, I do it from a place where I check my heart posture first, because what the Bible says to me about correction is that it should come from a place of love, not from a place of frustration, not from a place of anger. But if I'm going to correct you, it's going to have to be in the correct way. My correction has to be correct. And so it can't just be a situation where I am trying to correct you because I'm angry or I'm frustrated. I have to take into consideration your humanity first before I correct you. And so the way to do that is to go to you personally, as the Bible tells us to go to you personally and tell you what my gripe is with you, and for us to work that out. And then what we could have done, if I still feel that this needs to be said out loud, me and you together could have come forth and we could have created a situation where me now, Sexy Red, somebody like a Sexy Red and a Bernice King can come together, have this conversation, and Sexy Red could then, under the advisement of Bernice King, say to her, to the influence that she has, because Sexy Red does have influence. Now Sexy Red can come forth and use her influence to her demographic of fans and followers and say to them, hey y'all, I posted this on my social media and I had and it triggered a conversation with MLK's daughter, Bernice King, where she shared with me that what I did was unintentionally disrespectful to the legacy of MLK. And now that I've had time to have a conversation with her and think about my actions, I want to encourage us all to be more mindful of the things that we're posting and how we respect our leaders. Why is that not the end goal that we want? We say stuff like, Sexy Red ain't this, she ghetto trash, she detrimental to the community. If you know that about her, why would you then not, as somebody who has the legitimacy of being MLK's daughter, you are the protector of his legacy. Your father's legacy was love. His entire legacy was built on love. Why would you not extend that legacy and go to a Sexy Red who people say things like she's detrimental to the community and turn her into a beacon of light, turn her into a beacon of love and hope? Why would you not do that if you believe in the legacy that you're so passionate about protecting? Where's the love?
Let her cook. Let her cook. Keep cooking. You done cooking? Can I step into the kitchen? Because it's hot in here. Listen, let me look at this image again. I thought about this long and hard. I really did. I looked at the images and I really tried to see what other people claim that they are seeing. But I got to be honest with you. I just don't see it. Now, I think that Bernice King is right and she's wrong. As a gatekeeper of her father's image, she has every right to fire off and to check people who she feel like has disrespected her father. She has every right to do that. But when I looked at this image, I don't see any disrespect. I didn't see any disrespect when it initially came on my timeline. I'm looking at the image and I'm like, is she twerking? It's just an image of her. It appears to be in the club and they're dancing. And my thought was, before I heard any comments from Sexy Red, was that this was just her way of showing her reverence and respect. Now, I don't have to necessarily agree with it, but that's just what I thought. And then once she responded to Bernice King and came out and said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I apologize. Unapologetically, she didn't offer any caveats. She said, oops, my bad. To me, it just doubled down on the fact that she didn't mean any harm by it. Listen, Bernice King came at this young sister with 2 barrels locked and loaded, and it was overkill. It was unnecessary. She could have just as easily as sent her a direct message, and the same thing would have happened. Sexy Red would have said, hey, okay, my bad, and would have took it down. But she wanted to do it publicly. I thought that was a very interesting point that Raven made. Martin Luther King had enough love to show compassion when he was dealing with white racists. But here you are, you got a disagreement with this sister, but you want to go berserk on her with both barrels. Wait a minute, where's the love? I thought it was hypocritical to Martin Luther King's legacy. And I think a lot of this comes from this conversation that we've been having about Sexy Red in general and what she is and what she isn't to the Black community. A lot of people look at her and think she's kind of detriment. I don't see that. She might not create the kind of music that I like, although she got a couple dope songs that's fire that I do listen to from time to time. But when it comes on, I might move here or there. But that's just it, man. A lot of people are taking their preconceived notions about this sister because of she got tattoos and she twerks and she talks about her sexuality, and they're projecting it into this situation. But if anybody was more wrong here, in my opinion, it's Bernice King and the way that she handled this. Look, just because you from the civil rights generation, you older, does not mean that you get to disrespect people that's younger with you, even when you got a point.
How did she disrespect her, Nathan? I mean, saying that what she did was inappropriate. First of all, I think characterizing her, what she said to Sexy Red, as going berserk, I think is a gross overstatement of her response.
In terms of how people do things on the internet these days.
Red. Secondly, Bernice King is not responsible for what people in the chats and response say about Sexy Red. You best believe if anybody had anything negative to say about Sexy Red in the chat, it wasn't because of the Martin Luther King meme. They already felt that way about her. And that was just an entree for them to go ahead and put their feelings out there about. They suddenly didn't just develop these feelings about Sexy Red because of that meme. That just presented them an opportunity for these folks who already felt this way about her to trash her. And Bernice King is not responsible. Bernice King is not responsible for that any more than you're responsible.
Bernice King is responsible
that anybody
for that.
would say in the chat about a
Bernice
take that
King
we have
is 100%
here. They wanted to get at.
responsible for what she does. And what she could have done is she could have handled this in a more respectful and private manner.
According
she could
to
have
you,
sent her a direct.
According
to me,
is everybody's opinion.
Let me finish. She could have sent her a direct message and said, "Hey, look, sis, I don't really like this. Can you take it down?" And what we have seen from Sexy Red is she got way more respect for herself and her elders than people think she do. She would have said, "Okay, ma'am," like she said she did in public, and that would have been it. Bernice King wanted to publicly humiliate this girl for no reason whatsoever, and she didn't show this young black girl.
So what did she say that was publicly humiliating?
I'm about to land. One more sentence.
Just include that in your what she said that was publicly humiliating.
One more sentence, I'm going to land this plane. Maybe two. Two more sentences, I'm going to land this plane.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Bernice Jackson should have, and I always come through, Bernice Jackson could have said, you know what? I'm going to show this woman, this young sister, this young rising sister, the same kind of loving compassion that my father said that we should show the white racist. That's what she could have done.
Hey, okay. So after I get done, I want you to go back and tell me what she said that was publicly humiliating other than calling her out. Put the picture up there one more time, Nathan, and I'm going to describe to you what's disrespectful. Now, first of all, you got Martin Luther King, who's a preacher, in a club atmosphere with Sexy Red. You see how he's looking at her. That is not just no regular look. The way that he's looking at Sexy Red, with her hand in her hand, him being a married man dancing with her in the club, being a married preacher dancing with her in the club, looking that way. You mean to tell me you don't see that as disrespectful?
I do not.
Okay. Well, then again, that is where we disagree. And obviously Bernice King didn't agree either. And it fired her up to the point where she was well within her rights to put her on blast. And that's all, and put everybody else on blast and make them understand you're not going to be able to do this, whether you Sexy Red or anybody else. If you put my daddy out there like that, I'm coming for you. I ain't mad at Bernice King. I'm gonna say this. And again, it's a generational thing. Raven, a lot of y'all young ones coming up, y'all could not have been raised under the same conditions that we did. Because
my mother is 85 years old.
You know what about your feelings when it came to correction?
My mother is 85 years old. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just saying, like, I hear from a lot of young people today, like, look, wasn't no coddling back in those days. If you stepped out of bounds, if it was disrespectful, you got dealt with accordingly.
You had to be raised by a generation that didn't respect you. That's completely different than coddling. The generation that raised you didn't value respecting you because you were a child.
Bernice King never called Sexy Red trash. You're putting on Bernice King what people in the chats responded.
But I'm putting that on her. I'm putting that on her because of how she handled the situation.
Put that on her, Raven.
I can't put that on her because you know why I put that on her. You know why I can put that on her because then she cannot
hold her responsible.
Kevin, you want to know? But you want to know why I can? You want to know why I can? You want to know why I can? Because if she didn't feel some level of responsibility for the reaction, she would never have then come out after Sexy Red's apology to then tell people, don't use what I said to denigrate her. Don't use what I said to disrespect her. I don't think that girl is ghetto. I don't think that girl is trash. Don't put words in my mouth.
That wasn't going to stop people from saying what they were going to say. If you think Bernice King saying that was going to stop people from saying what they said about Sexy Red, you are sorely mistaken.
That's not the point, though, Kevin. People were calling her ghetto trash because of Bernice King's response to what happened. And if she would have taken the time to come to Sexy Red personally and had that conversation, there would be no conversation about how trash and ghetto and disrespectful Sexy Red is.
I guarantee you, even if Bernice King hadn't said anything, other people who would have thought that was objectionable would have said something, and we'd be having the same conversation.
But that's not the reason
why. But the reason why it's amplified to this level was because one of King's defendants said something about it. And
the reason why it got amplified is because Bernice King responded and said something. You're right. There are probably people in the comments like, girl, what you doing with this? But when Bernice King said that, the daughter of King, it took her from here to here.
She created a public stage for humiliation.
Okay. I'll just tell you this right now. I think it's ridiculous to put on anybody the responses that other people come back and say. If I am well within my rights to say something to somebody for something that they did to disrespect me, I'm not responsible if other people want to come pile on and give their opinions too. Again, like I said, that would be like saying anybody that came in the chat and said anything against any of us. Well, if Nathan hadn't been talking about Bernice King, that wouldn't have never. That's crazy. That's just crazy. I just don't think that you can hold somebody responsible for what other people say.
She held herself responsible. That's the point. Bernice King went back on social media and said, wait a minute now. I made my point. Y'all going too far. She held herself responsible.
She's defending her. She's defending her. Okay. Why? So how is it Bernice King's fault then? So
because her original statement opened the door for it. That's why she had to come back and correct it. Her original statement opened the door for it. You gotta be real about it, Kevin. You gotta be real about it, Kevin. Bernice King's voice has a level of legitimization to it that people take what she says and it gives license to whatever they feel about whatever she's talking about, because she is the authority on that thing. She is Martin Luther King's daughter. If she comes forward and has any kind of, disparaging thing to say about anybody in regards or in response to something about her father, it opens the door for everything else that comes in behind her. And because in that moment of being frustrated with something that she saw on social media, she didn't take that into consideration. It is now. It's the same thing we talk about when we talk about the responsibility of celebrities and how our kids look up to their role models and who they found role models in. Our kids listen to music, they watch sports, and they find their role models in these players and these basketballers and these football players and these rappers and these singers. And we say stuff like, well, if your kids find them people to be role models, then you should, especially when it comes to music, don't let your kid listen to that music. That's cool in theory, but like your kids are going to enjoy the music they enjoy, and they're going to look up to those musicians because they like what they have to say and they like what they represent. And so when that same musician does something that is unbecoming of a role model for a child, we pile on them and we jump on them because you represent something. You are a legitimate voice to whoever is a follower of you or whoever, aligns themselves, whatever you align yourself with. And so as Bernice King, you have one hell of a platform as MLK's daughter. So when you say something, it don't just reach your immediate circle and your immediate group. It touches every end of the earth because you are Bernice King. And so you open that door when you start to say things like this was intentionally disrespectful and deplorable and all these big D words that she said: distasteful, dishonoring, deplorable, disrespectful. And then she added in a little part about because he was assassinated for working for your civil rights and your human rights to end war on poverty. That was a dig, and we're not going to act like it's not a dig. And so when you do that, you have to also understand, because I am the voice that I am, because I am protecting the legacy that I protect, which is one of love, I must move in love because that is what I'm trying to protect. It's counterproductive for you to want to protect a legacy built on love and not be loving.
Dr. King wouldn't have did that.
Never would have done
Man,
that.
come on, please,
Dr.
man.
King
Dr.
would've
King
did that.
told it like it was all the time. Don't
Dr.
look,
King
Told
would've
it
did
like
that.
it was, but we did it in love.
Don't twist love with truth. And
No, it's
sometimes
called.
the most truthful things are said in a way that sting you.
It ain't what the Bible says.
And look, we're just gonna agree to disagree with this, because again, this gets to the place where I just can't move away from the fact that we are taking responsibility away from the person who generated this issue. Sexy Red would not have had no problems. Like, I love. Why couldn't have Bernice King have just picked up the phone and why couldn't Sexy Red have picked up the phone before she posted it and called Bernice King or somebody else, or private message them and say, "Hey, I got this man. I just want to know, would you have a problem if I posted this on online or not?"
Who does that?
Because
Nobody
she
does
didn't,
okay, Nathan.
because she didn't
Nobody
know,
does that.
because
Because
she
it
didn't know
wasn't
that she
a
would
problem.
get that correction. Like
Y'all
you
be killing
can we
me,
agree
man.
that if you're
Y'all
ignorant to
killing me.
something, you're gonna need correction before you fix the issue? Like if
Y'all
I'm
killing me.
ignorant, if I am ignorant, you have to teach me that I'm ignorant. I don't just look up one day and think to myself, oh, that might be ignorant. No, somebody tells you that what you did was ignorant. That's how you fix it.
Sometimes you learn more from the tail whooping than the lecture.
So you want us to believe that Sexy Red woke up on Martin Luther King Day and decided, you know what?
I'm gonna be disrespectful
I'm
today.
gonna be disrespectful to Martin Luther King. I do not believe that about
Who does that
at all. I do not believe that.
I'm not saying she had to believe that. I'm just saying that if you're going to play, look, all of us are responsible for what we say and what we do, whether that's with malice or without malice. And there are consequences that come along with that. Again, I give Sexy Red credit because she took it just like I had to take it when I was a young person. Yes, ma'am. After you get your behind whooped, after you get embarrassed publicly, when you done showed out in the grocery store doing something you wasn't supposed to do, sometimes you got whooped right there in front of everybody in the grocery store. And you know what you said afterwards, after you got done crying? Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
The difference is
Sexy Red took her whooping. She took her whooping. I'll give her credit for handling it the way that she handled it. But sometimes when you mess up, you got to take the whooping. She took
two things. One, you just made my point that this was a whooping, that she was trying to embarrass her. So you just made that point. And the number two,
I'm not making the point. I'm not making the point that necessarily. If you want to look at a whooping as she got corrected by let me explain. She got corrected by Bernice King. The whooping that she took was in the comments by the people who piled on to what Bernice King said. I stand by the fact that I think what Bernice King said in her correction was totally appropriate. It was the way that she felt.
Right.
It was the way anybody would feel and respond if they felt like their family member was being disrespected.
So you're trying to clean it up and back away, but basically you agreed that what Bernice tried to do was embarrass this young sister, which is not of love. She didn't have to do that. But then secondly, with your analogy, the big difference is that Bernice King is not Sexy Red's mama. The civil rights generation, even when you have an issue with millennials or the hip hop generation, the way you approach people matters. Even if you're right. You can't come at somebody younger than you and disrespect them, even when you right, and expect that you're going to get respect in return. Young people, even when they're wrong, younger people, even when they're wrong, just like we do with our children, they deserve for us to calm down and approach them with respect. And Sexy Red didn't get that from Bernice.
Come on, man.
In my opinion, we can agree, disagree. I can tell you ain't going for it.
I just want to know what Bernice King said in her comment. Nothing that you read.
Everything she said, all of it
was disrespectful to Sexy Red in any way. Saying that it was distasteful. It was. Saying that it was dishonoring. It was. Saying it was deplorable. In her opinion, it was. Saying it was disrespectful to the family. You can't tell Bernice King that was not disrespectful to her family.
Well,
you're right.
For me, the issue is the word intentionally. That's the issue for me. It is the assumption that Sexy Red posted these photos to be intentionally distasteful, intentionally dishonoring, deplorable, and disrespectful, when clearly she did not. Because when you went out of your way to publicly embarrass her, she very quickly said that you know what, you're right. My bad. I didn't mean it like that. Like, you cannot. The assumption on Bernice's end was that look at this low class girl, her disrespect for my father's legacy. And that's what it read like. To anybody who has reading comprehension skills, that's what it read like. She made a claim that was not true and had to backtrack once it was made clear that it was not true. That's what we're looking at.
You took the word
said something that was not true. You said that he was intentionally disrespectful, and that was not the truth. And so you had to backtrack after making that statement and painting this picture that Sexy Red was being disrespectful to your father's legacy on purpose, and opening the floodgates for people to call her trash and ghetto and ratchet and disrespectful. You had to then come back to yourself and remember the legacy that you were protecting and let these people know, I don't think this girl is ghetto. I don't think this girl is trash. Although you probably did. But you realized how they read. You realized how this is not representative of the legacy that I'm trying to protect. So let me walk this back. When you could have avoided all of that if you just would have went to her individually and said, hey, sis, I don't know if you meant it this way, but this is disrespectful to my father's legacy, and I would appreciate if you remove this. And going forward, it might even be a great idea for you to use your platform and your influence, because at the end of the day, we keep forgetting this part. You don't have to like Sexy Red, but you got to respect her influence. You got to understand that she has a level of influence that if Black people can just like get out of our feelings sometimes and really think strategically, she could have used that as an opportunity to take her to use Sexy Red's platform to further her father's legacy in love. She could have used that opportunity to have a conversation with Sexy Red and then influence Sexy Red to influence her followers and the people who mess with her and who like her. Hey, y'all, we really got to be more cognizant. And I'm saying this in my terms. I don't know if Sexy Red even know what cognizant mean, but what I'm saying is she could have used that platform to say, hey, y'all, we got to be more cognizant of the stuff that we post, or we have to be more respectful of our leaders and how we use their likeness. That could have been an opportunity for Bernice King, not to just reach a Sexy Red, but her entire platform. And she missed it because she was angry.
Big Raven coming through.
She didn't miss nothing, because in all honesty, that's something that Sexy Red should be doing anyway without Bernice King.
How does she know to do that if nobody ever come to her and tell her that?
So Sexy Red is in her feelings enough and she hurt enough that she can't see. Again, y'all are taking the personal responsibility and accountability off Sexy Red and trying to put it on to Bernice King. And that's the problem that I have.
No, what's happening, Kevin, is you're not giving Bernice King any responsibility.
We can handle situations all types of ways. But again, I'm not going to disagree that she was trying to send a message to Sexy Red and everybody. If you put my pops out there like that, I'm coming for you.
Yeah,
and I ain't more.
No, you're trying to take the responsibility completely away from Bernice King. And all I'm saying is, if I had a chance to stand with Bernice King, I would say some of the same things that came up. Like, look, I get it. You're his daughter. You are rightfully the gatekeeper, way more than me. I can't tell you you're wrong, but sis, you could have came at that young sister the same way your father has taught us to go at people that we have a problem with. And she didn't do that.
Real. Let's be real.
Let me finish. Okay. You can defend King, but when you're defending King, do it in the spirit of King.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm not going to disagree with what you said, but y'all challenge me on the who does this sort of thing. Look, we all know when all hearts and minds are clear, what would be an ideal way to handle things. But when you in the heat of the battle and somebody disrespect you, I guarantee if you on the street and somebody run up on you and do something that you perceive to be disrespectful, you're not thinking about, man, let me pull this brother or sister aside and have a conversation with them. You're clapping back.
No.
You're going to clap back.
No,
it
depends. It depends. I just did it. It's a brother.
Yeah, wait a minute. It shouldn't depend. It shouldn't depend, Nathan.
I just did it.
Because if you're responding in love, if you're responding in Dr. King love, the situation doesn't matter. Whether it's in the valley or on the mountaintop, we need to pull that brother.
Like that preacher that was preaching for Trump.
Sister, let us hold hands and sing the old Negro spiritual. That's how y'all saying you should handle it. And I'm saying in real life, it don't happen that way.
It does happen that way all the time.
Back.
It depends on the situation. It does happen that way. Like I said, there's a brother that said some crazy stuff about me and my family. I could go straight off right now. But what did I say? Hey, bro, let's have a conversation. If I can do that, right, then Bernice King can do the same thing with this sexy red sister.
And I'm gonna say
she
this.
could have just sent her a direct message and said, look,
So
I got
Nathan,
a problem with you, sister. I got a problem with what you did. Here's what my problem is. Keep it private. It all would have went away.
So let me ask you this. So if they attack your wife or your son, you said they came crazy at you. Okay,
yeah,
that's
my
different.
wife was brought up.
So if somebody come at you, and say something that you perceive to be so disrespectful about your wife, you gonna be like, I'm gonna just pull you off to the side and have a conversation.
I got a better example for you that's more concrete to what we're talking about. Let's say I'm the son of Dr. Martin Luther King. Same scenario. Sexy Red puts this up. I got a problem with it. I'm going to send her a direct message first. That's the first way I'm going to try. Before I go in public and blast you, I'm going to try to reach out to you privately on some real stuff. And if we can't resolve it then I'm going to go public. That's what I would do.
Okay.
What would you do?
And also, let me just say again, I have the reputation over here on the bus for being the quote unquote disrespectful millennial. And it's simply because a lot of my elders don't realize when they've become disrespectful in a conversation. That's just real. I always, when I am having discussions and conversations with my elders on this here talk station, I always start from a place of respect because I was raised to respect my elders. My mother is 85 years old. I ain't been doing nothing since I got here but respecting my elders. So I know how to do it and I'm fluent in it. I think that what a lot of my elders don't understand is sometimes y'all feel like a disagreement or me not blindly nodding and saying yes to everything that you say, it's perceived as disrespect. And sometimes it don't automatically click because you were raised from a generation who didn't value your voice, who didn't value your opinion, who didn't care what you had to say if it didn't agree with everything that they said. Y'all come from that. That's and for a lack of a better way to explain it, that's the history. That's historical. Y'all come from that. And so when you deal with the millennial generation who has the audacity to disagree with you, you perceive it immediately as disrespect before you actually sit back and think to yourself, maybe there's something I should consider here. I don't get disrespectful, and I'm working on it. God is working on me. I don't get disrespectful until you disrespect me first, blatantly, not in some way that I perceive that you might be trying to disrespect. No, until you come out of your mouth and say something blatantly disrespectful to me, I'm not going to be disrespectful because you might not even realize how you talking to me right now. So I'm going to then take a moment to talk to you and say, hey, remember that thing you just said about me, or you realize what you're saying right now is coming from a place that's not very respectful. If I can't then have that conversation with you about how you're approaching the conversation and you don't care about how you talking to me, you don't care about how you are conveying your message in this moment where we are disagreeing, you don't care about the level of disrespect because you don't like that I disagree with you in this moment, then yeah, all hats are off. We getting disrespectful because you've now decided this is a disrespectful conversation. I didn't do that. You decided that. So I think in situations like this, the friction that we feel between the generations is sometimes it's on both sides, really, truthfully. I appreciate Sexy Red being an example of what a respectful millennial is, because y'all seem to think we don't exist. We do. But I also appreciate the fact that Bernice, although it was her fault, came forth and said, hey, y'all, don't disrespect this young lady, because this is not what this should have come out to be. And truthfully, she not gonna ever say that I should have said it privately, but that's kind of what she said. That's kind of what she said. I don't want y'all to take my words and twist them and denigrate this girl. We wouldn't have been able to do that if you hadn't said the words out loud in the first place.
Hey, Daryl makes an excellent point. And I agree with you 1,000%, bro. Look, we got to reconnect, bro. Listen, I got nothing but love for my brothers and sisters, so we can work it out. We'll have a conversation. I wasn't trying to put you out. It was just an example that came into my head, man. But Daryl makes an excellent point, and I agree with him. That brother, the Bishop Lorenzo, and doing his little impersonation during the Trump, that was way more disrespectful in my opinion, to Martin Luther King image than anything that Sexy Red posted in an AI photograph. But that's just, well, it's not just me. That's just how I look at it. Where's
the public tar and feathering for that young man from Bernice King?
No, I don't disagree. Yeah. I don't disagree. I mean, that should have been called out as well. You know, if I wouldn't have had a problem with Bernice King had she done that in that situation. My point of view would be consistent, but the fact that she didn't doesn't necessarily take away from that. That's a different conversation. Like selective outrage is selectively choosing who you want versus the right for somebody to say, and I get disrespect comes across to everybody differently. That's why you have to be careful. What one person views as disrespect, another person might not view as disrespect. What she said to me, there was nothing in her language or what she said that came across to me as disrespectful.
Let me ask you
a question. To you all, I seen the disrespect in the image that y'all didn't see.
Right.
So it hits everybody. It hits everybody a little bit differently. And this is why I'm saying that for Bernice King, it hit her in such a way where she felt within her rights to do it. Now, yeah. I mean, we can always debate whether she could have handled it differently. Sure, she could have. But I'm not mad that she did.
What would you have done? You're Bernice King. You see this image. Are you going to send her a direct message and try to deal with it privately first? Or are you just going to blast her on Instagram the way Bernice King did? What would you have done?
I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't really engage in a lot of back and forth on social media anyway.
So you wouldn't respond at all?
I see a lot of comments, even on things that I post or stories that I do. People say all kinds of crazy stuff. And for me, a lot of times it's not worth the fight. You know, it's like, I'm not going to give somebody, you know, the benefit of feeling like they own real estate in my head or my heart, because I don't. Believe me, I go to bed and I sleep just fine every day, regardless of what a lot of people's opinions are. But I think I agree with Raven in principle. What she said is probably more of the way that I would have handled it, unless I felt like, again, like I said, this could have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Like it all had, like, you could see so much. Like maybe this is something she's been seeing over and over again, and Sexy Red was finally the last one and she just snapped. I mean, we've all had situations like that where there's been a buildup of BS that we've taken, and then somebody just flowed past you, and it may not be that what they did was so egregious or so bad, but they was just the last straw and they caught it. Right. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's real. It happens. It happens to all of us in life.
I want to make sure I'm clear. I want to make sure I'm clear. So you're saying that if you were in Bernice King's situation,
right,
you more than likely would have sent her a private direct message first before you blasted her in public on the internet, on Instagram.
Again, I'm saying all things being equal, based on who I am, on who I am, that what Raven described is that's more consistent with who I am.
Okay.
But when I say I'm not mad at Bernice King, I can understand where somebody who might do that, who might have that in their personality, that might be the way that they deal with it. I could see how they would do that, and I wouldn't be mad at it.
I get it.
I started by saying, and theoretically, Raven's right. Like, you wish everybody would handle situations the way Raven laid it out. But sometimes I think Bernice King's point was she wanted to send a message not only to Sexy Red, but I think to everybody else. Don't stop playing with my father's image. And I think that, you know, I don't know this, but that was the sense that I got from that response, that she had just been fed up, and that Sexy Red happened to catch it. Like I said,
we all agree she was wrong.
She was the last one who came along and did it. And she was like, that's it. I've had enough. Boom.
So we all agree that she's in her rights to do it. But she was there. She didn't take the right. She could have taken a better route.
It was a better way to do it, though.
There was a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no argument.
Better way to do it, especially if you are
about that.
You tried it for a little while, though, Kevin. You tried it.
More optimal way to do it would have been in a way that would have honored her father's legacy, and I don't think that the way that she did it did that.
Right. I want to know what Phil thinks, because he's been silent for 10 minutes. he's like, what are they talking about?
You act like that's something like it's never happened before. I mean, where do you get that?
I know. You've been respectful, letting us have a conversation. But what's your take?
Well, I'm a little envious. I mean, nobody's ever referred to me as Sexy Phil, but that's the first thing in mind.
Hey, you just started something, Sexy Phil.
Yeah. I'm sure I did.
We'll hear that again.
But regardless of which of those two people were right, I will say this. I was very impacted by the last sentence in Bernice King's, whatever it was, tweet. And it just really stuck with me where she said, my father was assassinated for working for your human and civil rights and to end war and poverty. He was working for you. Regardless of who's right, I thought that was a powerful statement. And I just wonder how many, I don't mean to be, think about young, knock on, criticize young people. I wonder how many young people today really appreciate that. I just wonder about that what he did for us. I wonder how many really have any sense of that.
I feel that. Here on that, making that point. Yeah. Not about the young people, but just underlining his significance once.
Well, those of us who are older were closer, perhaps a little closer in age.
Oh, yeah.
You're closer to history. You're closer to that history.
Sure.
And like I said, it's I mean, I can't speak for nobody else, but again, my parent is 85 years old. My parent, was in her early 20s when she was allowed to vote for the first time. So I have a very unique experience as a millennial when it comes to this kind of stuff. I kind of came into the game with a little bit of a head start when it came to knowing my history, because I grew up in a house with somebody who lived it. And so I have a different level of reverence and respect for it. But I do look at people like Sexy Red, Sexy Red is younger than me. I do look at people like Sexy Red, who I know come from what I know about her, she comes from poverty. She comes from what I understand to be a school district that was suffering, as a lot of, school districts do suffer in impoverished communities. That's just kind of the reality. I think that she might have gotten maybe the same kind of minimal education about Martin Luther King that I got during that couple of weeks in February that, we kind of touch on Black history and then we leave it alone for the rest of the school year. Like, I think that it's very easy for her to not see that same disrespect that you saw, Kevin, because her education or her understanding of it may not be on the same level as yours. I think that it's very possible that she did something without understanding the impact, which is why I say, when you make the assumption that she did it intentionally and that she knew the full context of his legacy before she did it, and then you decide to tar and feather her in front of a live studio audience, it kind of works against what would be a teaching moment, what would be a moment of really giving her the impact of your father's legacy. You're so concerned about her disrespecting it, you don't even realize she don't even have the full context for it to even know that why you find what you find disrespectful until you explain it to her. And I think that in an effort to see some of the stuff that we want to see out of our communities, in an effort to see some of the healing and the growth and the unification that we so claim and that we crave from our community, in order to start that, we're going to have to start from a place of love. We're going to have to stop being mad at each other and disappointed in each other and decide that, yeah, Sexy Red makes music where she talks about, my coochie is pink and my booty hole's brown. She made that song and she became very popular for it. But in the same token, she now has amassed a platform and an influence, which I keep coming back to this point because we're not talking about it enough. She has amassed a platform and an influence where a girl like her, coming from where she come from and becoming who she's become, you had the opportunity to take that and use it for something beautiful that could have unified us, that could have brought us back to a place that we often talk about, that village mentality where we come together and we do things that heal our community, that offer each other resources and wisdom amongst the generations. You took that away from a whole bunch of people because you decided to move in frustration and move in anger in that moment, which is a human emotion. I'm not mad at you. Again, if people get to talking crazy about Della Jo and putting her in AI pictures and doing stuff, I'm gonna feel some type of way, best believe. But if I believe what I say about want my people to be unified and want my people to get to that place of that village mentality and of unification, to where we are able to have conversations that progress us, that move us forward, I have to start somewhere. And why not start in love? Because I think that if I continue to treat you as if you are my enemy, we not gonna get nowhere, babe.
Yeah,
you gotta be. I have to be a sister to you in this moment.
Let me seize on something that Raven said and Phil said. I'm gonna try to tie it together here.
That's Sexy Phil. Sexy Phil.
Sexy Phil. Well, I can't call another man sexy, so I'm gonna have to leave that alone.
Well, you don't mean it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
I'm comfortable with my manhood. There's no problem with
so here's Raven made a good point talking about maybe she didn't fully grasp or understand who King was or his legacy. And Phil talked about Bernice King's comment about trying to add some context to that about who King was and how Sexy Red is even able to do what she's able to do and enjoy the freedoms that she is because of the work that King did. But this is the problem that I have in general with what the King holiday has become. Okay, so we started out by saying, oh, Sexy Red was just trying. She was actually trying not to be disrespectful. She was trying to honor Dr. King. This is what I say about the superficial nature of how we treat the MLK Day, is that people post things, they do all of these things to try to make it seem like they're in the flow, that they're understanding, that they get with the civil rights march and all of that kind of thing. It's a symbolic show without any depth to it. Because if Sexy Red was sincere about her honoring of King, she would know the history and the legacy and would have a better understanding of how a posting of a meme like that could be misconceived. So again, this just gets back to the point. Like, people do a lot of things because it's the trendy thing to do. Oh, I'm gonna post a MLK post or an MLK meme because that's what they think they're supposed to do on MLK Day, but they have no real understanding of the significance of what the day is or any real meaning, any real intention on adding to the meaning of that legacy. And so I think you make a great point. Clearly, she needs to be educated. And clearly she needs to educate herself before she wants to put herself out there from the standpoint of acting like you're trying to sincerely represent this man and what he stood for. Educate yourself. Open a book on Martin Luther King. Read, understand, so that you're not just posting memes because that's the cool thing to do on MLK Day, but there ain't no depth, there ain't no substance beneath it. And that is the problem that I think too many people have with it, that MLK Day has just become that sort of thing. It's become, okay, I'm gonna go out and march, but I'm not really doing anything. I'm gonna go ahead and post these memes and make it seem like I'm down with MLK because that's kind of what I'm supposed to do on this day. But I'm not trying to expand my mind or learn or really kind of trying to understand what it is. That is part of the problem and why she found herself in this situation, because there was no depth to the post. And if there was depth to the post, she would have understood better how that could come off as controversy.
What I'll concede is that from hearing our conversation, I think there's an education that could be had on both sides. You know, from Bernice King's position, I think that she could learn about how to deal with these kind of situations in the future, but also with Sexy Red as well. I think the best case scenario would be they work together. Right. There's a generational rift inside the Black community. Sexy Red has a large and growing following. She ain't going nowhere. Bernice Jackson is who she is and represents what she represents. Why can't they work together in some way, in some initiatives, right, to kind of pull the generations together in a way that actually honors Dr. King's legacy and benefits Black folks? I think, to me, that would be the best case result at this point.
Yeah, I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, that may yet still happen. I mean,
yeah, I love that. And it could happen. We should. I'm gonna go on Bernice Jackson's Instagram and leave a message saying just that. You know, that's the only thing you can do at this point. I don't know the woman, but people read their comments, whether they respond to you or not. So I would love to see that. That would be the best case scenario. I don't know what it could be. Smarter minds than me can come together and come up with some kind of initiative. But I could see that working to educate both of the generations, right?
It's just something that's just something that I'm very interested in because of my unique position here at the Buzz. It's something that has been painfully obvious to me for the last few years of having to have conversations with my elders and then realize as I'm talking, nobody is actually paying me any attention because I'm too young for the conversation for some reason. But then at the same time, these are my same elders who say stuff like, why don't they care? Why don't they show up? Why don't they come out and protest? Why don't they do this? And why don't, because you won't talk to me. And when I try to talk to you, you like diminish my voice. Yep. And so I think that stuff like this is why I feel the way I feel about it. In a moment that could have been a teaching moment where you could have come to this young person and made a connection with her instead of embarrassing her or trying to humiliate her, you could have made a connection with her, and it could have the benefit outweighs your anger and your frustration in this moment. The benefit of moving in love outweighs the disrespect that you feel. And I wish that we could think like that when we think about this gap in the generations. Because truth be told, as a community, Black people, and I need you to hear this loud and clear, we're not going to get anything done if we can't even find respect for each other across the age, like across the generations, let alone economic differences, let alone like lifestyle differences or religious differences. Old and young, on a civilization level, you do not survive without each other. The young do not survive without the old, and the old do not survive without the young. And so Black people, if we actually want to see some progress, we're gonna have to figure out how to talk to each other across these generational lines. And
even when we have a disagreement with somebody, even when you have a righteous disagreement,
that is the most imperative to put in that effort. We will not survive. We will not progress if we don't figure out how to love each other past our frustrations.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And here's one thing that I would say. Earlier Raven said that, some older generations feel like younger generations are more disrespectful. Maybe, I don't know. Some people might say that. What I would say you are more of, rather than disrespectful, is sensitive. And I think that that's something that the younger generation is going to have to learn how to endure better. Tougher. Well, I just think like
Bernice King
younger generations sort of view tough conversations as disrespect. And I've run into this a lot of times. The things that it takes to set off a younger person and what they perceive to be disrespectful is so much it's a hair trigger. It's a much more hair.
But the elders respond in the same way. If I do this on a daily. If I don't come out of the gate with all of the most nicest words I can think of when I am trying to approach a hard conversation with my elders, off the bat, I'm disrespectful. I'm too young to know what I'm talking about. I don't know nothing. I'm inexperienced. I'm all these things that disqualify me from even having a voice in the conversation. So we're going to talk about sensitivity. We're going to have to talk about it as a two-way street.
Hey, Raven, I was in your same position. I heard the same thing from the Buzz audience. And I was way more barbaric about it, like unapologetic. This is what it is.
Well, you are the barbarian.
Go sit your old ass down somewhere. So I was a whole lot more aggressive with it than I hear you being, but I heard the same thing. And in this case, Kevin, Bernice King was overly sensitive, in my humble opinion. But go right ahead, bro.
Yeah, no, I think so. And again, I mean, I fall into that OG category now. As hard as that is for me to accept, the grade don't allow me to deny it no more. I gotta accept that I'm in the OG category.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
you're definitely on the back nine.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe on 16, 17, or 18 field right now. But the young people today have way more voice and agency than we had.
Hallelujah.
Than we had growing up. I mean, you were essentially seen and not heard. I think what younger generations don't have, because of that, I think to some degree what they don't have that we have is sort of a general acknowledgement of respect of people who are older than you, even if they're less educated, even if they're less accomplished. There was still this notion of the yes, ma'am, yes, sir. The respecting just the pure fact that they were an elder granted them certain privileges, even if you felt quietly inside to yourself that you didn't really feel like they deserved or you wanted to give, you still gave that. Young people today don't do that. They step over those boundaries off the rip without even acknowledging the fact that, hey, you know what? I might be smarter than this older person, but I'm going to give them the respect simply because they kind of helped pave the way, or, they've lived. So I'm going to give them, just their due respect based on that. I think I see a lot of young people today skip straight over that step to, hey, this is what I think, blah, 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 blah. And without giving, they want the respect, but they will not give it off the rip to their elders. And I think that's where it becomes.
Can I say something, Kevin?
Yeah.
Can I say something? I would just say that, Michael Eric Dyson has written about this before. It's called predecessor blues. Your parents and your grandparents said the same thing about you. That's just what older people say about the next generation. And it don't matter when the generations are. That's just how it is. People said the same thing about us. The hip hop generation, they said the same. They said the same thing. We got way more agency. And we disrespectful. We don't want to listen. We heard the same thing from them. So I don't think that's particular to millennials or anybody else. That's just predecessor blues. The
And I've
lament
even
of the
heard
older
the same.
generation about the younger generation.
I've even heard the same being said about from millennials, because we are in our 30s and 40s now. If you didn't know, millennials are getting up there. We have children now, and we have close proximity to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and them little young.
Same thing, right? You feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. They have so much. They have so much they have so much dignity we were never allowed to have as millennials. But I understand that because of how I feel in my position, I have to think twice about how I perceive them in that way. I'm willing to do that because I know how it felt to, in moments, not feel like I had a voice or not be respected, but have something to say. Even in this, even when I had something to say, and it wasn't important to the conversation, or it wasn't effective, or it was misguided, even allowing me to say it opens the door for you to check me, opens the door for you to correct me. But if you never even give me a voice enough to say what I got to say, you'll never know where you went wrong in not correcting me, or where you went wrong in not teaching me a principle or a value that you intended to teach me or instill in me. I think that when we have conversations, I don't know if there's enough responsibility being had by those who were tasked with growing me, with teaching me, with bringing me to this point of what I understand about the world around me. Before I got to where I am, somebody had to teach me something. Somebody had to give me some kind of basis for how I feel about things. This didn't just come out the blue sky. Everything that I hold to be a moral or a principle was taught to me by whoever raised me, or at least given a foundation for that until I got grown. But if you feel like millennials are, sensitive or disrespectful or any of these things, why does it not make you think twice about who was responsible for getting them there? Because I get being an adult and making decisions for yourself, and eventually you have to, reconcile what you learn with what you know to be true about the world around you as an adult. But on the base level, if you can, in one breath, complain about the parenting that millennials do and how y'all hate the way that we parent kids these days, and you hate the way that, the Gen Z and Gen Alpha act or react to things, or their indifference to things, you have to understand where that comes from. And you say stuff like, well, it's the parents' fault. It's the parents' fault. But it's never the parents' fault when a millennial disagrees with you, or a millennial says something that you don't like, or a millennial walks into a conversation with you and doesn't give you the reverence that you feel you deserve in that conversation. Was that something that you instilled in that millennial? It was instilled in me. That's why I do it. It was something I'll say this, and then I'll move on and let somebody else have the floor. When I first got here to the buzz, I wasn't talking on air. I was just screening calls. It is a natural thing for me to say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And I would say that when I would get on the phone, and my elders would get so up in arms about me simply saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, because they felt I was being disrespectful, as if I was like pointing out their age on purpose. No, ma'am, no, sir. I was just raised. As a matter of fact, if I didn't say it, I got in trouble. If I didn't say it, I got a whooping for not saying yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. But that perception of you a disrespectful millennial, so everything out of your mouth is disrespectful anyway. No, I was actually raised right. I was raised the way that you prefer I'll be raised. But because you have this preconceived notion about where I'm coming from, everything out of my mouth now to you is disrespectful. And that's just not the truth. I was raised the way that you prefer for me to be raised. But because you won't take a moment to think twice about how you're perceiving me and about how you're dealing with me, you've already decided who I am, where I come from, and what I'm about. And I think that, again, when you have them conversations between the generations, we both me and my young self, my young disrespectful self, and you, Elder Kevin, we both have to approach the conversation and realize there's been a disconnect here for generations. We're not going to solve it overnight. And so both of us have to look at ourselves and wonder, is the way that I'm approaching this conversation the best way to do that? And you don't really do that until you start talking. So if I come to you and I say, Kevin, I don't like such and 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 such, and then you say, Raven, I don't like such and such and such and such and such and such and such. We both can then get to a place where I know what Kevin thinks is respectful and what he thinks is disrespectful. And Kevin can say, I know what Raven thinks is respectful and what Raven thinks is disrespectful. Now we can actually sit down and have a very important and hard conversation that will move us forward. But we can't do that if we don't even want to have a conversation about how do I respect you in this moment? And instead of just calling you sensitive, instead of just calling you old and senile, we both got to have this conversation from a place of, I don't even
You can call him that. That's okay.
I'm just saying, we both have to have the conversation about what is the appropriate way to have the conversation and then move from there. We can't just come into the conversation with the assumption of anything. It's been generations long, decades long of us being misunderstood from one another. And so I have to walk into the conversation knowing that you don't understand me. I don't understand you. But at some point, we're coming together to have this conversation so that we can understand each other. But we all got to be, we both got to be less sensitive in that conversation to get to the point. That's
absolutely less sensitive and equally respectful. I always say, if everybody comes to the table, giving the same respect that you expect to get, that's a beginning foundation that you can begin for a conversation. So if I'm having a conversation with whoever and I say I'm going to deal with them in the same respectful manner that I would want them to give back to me, and if they have that same attitude, chances are we'll probably be able to have a pretty good conversation. Nathan, this might be fodder for a podcast at some point, but I always make the case that 90% of the issues that we deal with are communication related. And the fact of the matter is that most people, by and large, are bad communicators. They either have difficulty expressing their thoughts, don't have the vocabulary to express their thoughts, may not have the emotional intelligence to deal with their feelings in the midst of a conversation. And so all of the tone may be off. So all of those different things, and that's just in one conversation, that we'll try that you might try to have on any given subject. And then you're bringing into that conversation your biases, your worldview, your trauma, your life experience. All of that is coming with you into every conversation that you have. I don't care what the topic is, but most people don't take the time to sit down and dissect that when they're communicating. They're not thinking about processing how something that happened to them when they was 5 years old is showing up in a conversation that we're having right now, and that takes some individual work, but it also takes collective work for us to, as Raven is saying, trying to figure out, how can I personally be a better communicator? And then how do we have conversations that actually result in something? I mean, if the only purpose of the conversation is to win, you've already lost, like if that's the purpose of any conversation that you're entering into is to win that conversation, you have already lost, whether you feel like you won it or not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this week let's switch gears here, another topic. So this week we had a lot of very impactful and eventful moments, including a moment with the now President Donald Trump when he attended a prayer service. I want to play a clip for you real quick and then get your reaction on the other side. Check this out.
I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminal.
So that is Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy. She is the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, and she took that moment during a prayer service to send a direct message to Donald Trump, one of love and peace. Like, look, a lot of people are afraid about what you're planning on doing, and just want you to think about, peace and love, and think about people. Since then, Donald Trump has gone on Truth Social and said that he demands an apology. Said she was nasty. Some of his supporters have gone online saying that she was out of line and that she needs to basically lose her job. I want to get your opinion about what she said. Was she out of line, or did she do the right thing?
She did the right thing. I feel she was an example of what it actually means to it's interesting. To me, she's the example of what it actually means to believe in a God and believe in a righteous God. She simply asked for him to treat people like people. She asked for him to take into consideration the policies and things that you put in place and how it affects, constituents that did not vote for you. That it affects, you being in office isn't just for the benefit of the people who voted for you. It's for everybody. That is the role and the function of a president, to take into consideration the needs and the wants and the desires of all American citizens, not just the ones who voted for you. I don't think that there was anything wrong with her asking him to not be vindictive in that space, or not to be discriminatory or prejudiced in that space. I don't think that she said anything out of whack to him at all. So it does kind of genuinely shock me to hear people have something negative to say about what she said. All she said was treat people with love. You are sitting inside of a prayer service, so you must believe in some kind of higher power. You must believe in some kind of God. And if you are believing the same religious text that I'm reading from, then you must believe the things that are coming out of my mouth. I don't see why there's any kind of backlash for what she said to him, honestly.
Hey, Phil, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just incredibly impacted by her message. I sent it around to a couple of you and a bunch of my friends. And actually, I have a very close friend. His name is Chris Yaw, who actually many years ago was a Channel 12 reporter, but he is an Episcopal priest up kind of in Detroit, or in the Detroit area. And knows her very well. He's worked with her on various projects. And, he just was telling me, just spoke very highly of her. But I'll tell you something. What she said was speaking truth to power. That's what it was. And I just think it's ironic that the vast majority of evangelicals, of which I consider myself, voted for Donald Trump. And here's a woman of a small physically stature who had the courage to confront the leader, the most powerful man in the world, with the truth. And I mean, to me, what she said was prophetic. It was Christ-like, and it was something that needed to be said. And the Bible says that a wise man listens to a rebuke. Well, Donald Trump wouldn't listen. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'm going to say consistent. This is 100% speaking truth to power. I don't know Bishop Marianne Edgar Buddy, but she is my kind of person, because you're not going to get a lot of opportunities to make those kind of statements, especially at the beginning of the administration. So I got no problem with it.
In Trump's face.
In his face, the way it's supposed to be, face to face. You're here. Let's talk about it right now. I don't think she was disrespectful. She wasn't hostile. I think she was just mature, and I think she was speaking from the heart. And I think it took a lot of courage, because she knows Donald Trump is a vindictive man. She knows Donald Trump has supporters who will come after her. We should keep our eyes on what happens to that woman. I would not be surprised if they come after her in some kind of way. Funding, some kind of way they're going to come after her, because that's what MAGA does. And I give her a lot of credit. And she's got more. She showed in that moment more courage than a lot of men have shown and are showing right now. She showed more courage than Snoop and Nelly, in my opinion. She stood up and spoke her mind. And the fact that Donald Trump is so thin-skinned that he just can't take it and move on, and he wants to criticize her and talk about how nasty she is, just goes to show his character and his personality type. So no, she gets 5 stars in my book.
So I'm going to go ahead and weigh in. I intentionally laid back on this and let everybody else go because this might take a minute. And I'm going to come at it from the pastoral cloth, being a pastor myself. Let me address Donald Trump's comments first. It's Donald Trump. It's par for the course. He said what you would expect for him to say. This is a man who, even after surviving a assassination attempt and claiming that he believes he's here because the Lord spared him, he still continues to speak and conduct himself in a way that does not reflect that. And so it's no surprise to me that his response was what it was. I applaud the bishop for what she said. But even the truth can't penetrate a hardened heart. Sometimes a person's heart can become so hardened and callous, even the best preached word is not going to penetrate that. So Donald Trump's response was par for the course, because this is a man who has a hardened heart, who even when faced with his own mortality, refused to reflect on himself and change, as almost any sane individual, particularly any of us with any type of spiritual connection. Anytime most people have a brush with death, you start reevaluating yourself. He has shown no signs of that. So if that didn't move him, I was not compelled to believe that this bishop's words was going to result in any kind of revelation for him that he was going to. So his response was pretty much par for the course. Now let me address the bishop. As someone who understands the sanctity of the pulpit, what a serious responsibility is when you take that calling on. And I get there are probably some people that are out there. I heard somebody use the phrase, Nate, in one of your comments sections, pork chop preachers. And I wanted to ask you, I was like, man, that's a new one for me. What's a pork?
Right. I ain't never heard that one before.
Preacher. I want to know.
I didn't see it.
I want to know what that is. I kind of got tickled by that. But I get there are people out there who are skeptical of pastors, and for good reason. You've had some who have violated, their calling and the people's trust by how they've handled themselves and have done a disservice to many who are about, earnestly and honestly trying to do the work of God. And so I know that anytime that I step into a pulpit, it is not without careful consideration of not what I want to say, but what I feel like God is leading me to say, or where he's directing me to teach the people. Not my will, but his will be done. So I think anybody who takes their calling seriously does not step into the pulpit with political intentions. That's just my view. Other people. Is
that how you look at
her? So here's what I say. Politics and religion are always a bad mix. And here's why I say that is because if you are a person of faith, your religious belief should always trump your politics. There's no question about that. Who I am should be led by my faith, not my politics. And I say this all the time to people who are in the church. What are you leading with? And again, my faith trumps my race. It trumps my politics. It trumps a whole lot of other ID components that people often want to lead with over their spirituality, or try to mold their spirituality to fit these things. So I'm gonna mold my spirituality and my faith to fit my race or to fit my politics or whatever. It's like you're going down a buffet line trying to take out and make it fit what you want it to fit. So I think as a preacher, you have an obligation to preach the truth, whatever that is. Now, people might take it as political, right? And that's why I say, like, my meditation and what God sends me to tell you, don't be mad at me. This is what the message that I was given to bring. Okay. I'm just relaying the word. And that's why you have to be careful about keeping out of certain things, your point of view. And if you are going to insert a point of view in a sermon, and anybody who's heard me preach will tell you this, that when I decide to go off script between what God says, I will let you know, hey, this is what I think. Lord didn't tell me to say this. This is what I'm going to say, in a given moment. But you try your best not to do that and stick with what God told you, because that's what he wants you to deliver to the people. Like, that's really what counts. So I'm gonna say, trusting that the bishop went through that same process, that while she had an opportunity to address the president, in that moment she wanted to speak the truth. What thus saith the Lord about how we should conduct ourselves. And that is the type of courage and bravery that every pastor should be having. We should not be forfeiting the truth to try to curry favor with anybody, a president, a dictator, a CEO, somebody who's got an opportunity to drop a boatload of money in your church. If you say that should not be how people who have that calling conduct themselves. It should always be about speaking the truth.
Guys,
and I'll say this. God's word is not political. But if you want to look through it through a political lens, there are a lot of things that God says that can be political, right? Like, hey, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. You can politicize those commandments if you want to. There are a lot of things that Jesus said that if you wanted to politicize them, or that God says that you could politicize them if you wanted to. But if you're a person of faith, you believe that as the truth, not politics, right? And you're not molding your faith to reinforce and justify your politics. And I feel like too many people compromise their faith and their beliefs to try to mold it around their politics for their own self-serving purposes. And that's not right. I think the bishop did her level best to try to bring.
Forgive me, I have to jump off. I just would like to just say one thing, kind of
go right ahead.
I go to Crossroads Church, which is, kind of a big kind of mega church. And I love the place and I like the preaching and everything. But during the campaign, our pastor gave kind of a message. It was about the election. And his message was kind of like, hey, whether you're pro-Trump, we're anti-Trump, or liberal, conservative, Jesus comes first, which I agree. But I think that's a good message, but maybe this wasn't the right time for it. And I wrote him a letter. I don't know if you even read it, but what I pointed out was that and again, I'm not anywhere in Kevin's league as a Bible scholar. I don't nowhere near there. But as some of you may know, do you know why John the Baptist was executed? Well, it wasn't because he was actually preaching the gospel and all that. It was because he spoke truth to power. He said that the ruler, I forget what, Herod, whoever the heck it was doing something immoral. And he spoke out against that. That's what got him in jail, and that's what got him executed. And so when people say, politics, it shouldn't be mentioned. I'm not saying Kevin was saying this, well, it shouldn't be mentioned, shouldn't be mixed up. Hey, that is an example where somebody who was a pretty strong man of God, he spoke truth to power, just like the bishop did. And so I think both those instances should be role models for us.
Sure. And using that example, Phil, John the Baptist wasn't speaking politically. He was speaking over an act that he saw that was unacceptable according to God's word. That's where I'm saying about, you could take all of the stories in the Bible and you could apply them to a political lens, but most of the people in the Bible were speaking about life and society in general. This wasn't a political statement. Jesus was crucified for political reasons, but he wasn't political. Many people wanted him to be political. Many people thought the Messiah that was coming was going to be one who was going to overthrow the Roman government. And when Jesus was talking about bringing the kingdom to earth, that's what people thought he was talking about. But that wasn't what he was talking about. He's talking about a higher level, a higher kingdom mindedness within all of us. And that's why I say, like, if we put our faith first, if we put our beliefs and our teachings and the truth of what we know first, The politics will take care of themselves. You will not support or endorse somebody who's a liar because you don't believe in the sanctity of someone who would do that. You would not support someone who is a murderer or a criminal one, not because you don't love them, not because you don't believe in redemption, but it speaks to what type of leadership do you expect to come from that? You know, what type of leadership do you expect to come from an unredeemed, non-righteous individual? You can't get good from evil. You know, I mean, that's just basic. It just makes basic sense. And so if we're all true to our principles and speak truth to power, and this is what I've said many times, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, when you see and especially if you're a person of faith, when you see something that does not coincide with your faith, you are obligated to speak out on it. And sometimes that's going to make you unpopular, even with the people who consider themselves to be in your like group, because you're going to say stuff that's going to ruffle people's feathers. If you speak the truth, if everybody always loves what you say and you never get any pushback, then I would question how much truth you're actually speaking. Because if you really do speak truth to power, you're going to run into some obstacles. You're going to run into some persecution. Some people going to come for your throat and try to take you out. The beloved Dr. Martin Luther King ain't with us no more because he was speaking truth to power. And somebody decided, hey, we need to shut that down. That is what comes along with speaking truth to power. Threat, you know, getting outcast, people coming for you. You know, that's par for the course. And people are coming for the bishop right now.
And when we talk about the proximity of, you know, faith and government, we also have to acknowledge too that in a lot of forms of government that, you know, faith and religion have kind of been the kind of like, I guess, grandfather of that particular form of government. Like a lot of government came from a place of, I mean, at least what I was taught in school, a big portion of how America came to be, you know, other than, you know, taxation without representation and all that stuff, was also that people were seeking the right to serve the God they wanted to serve without persecution. That's the story for many a nation. And I think that is very political. That whole concept of even when you read the Bible, like a lot of what we would consider the op of Christianity was the Roman Church, which was heavily influenced by, you know, that form of government in Rome. It was, I identify that when you have something that you believe in that is bigger than yourself, it is threatening to a very man-made system that requires for me to kind of reject the idea of something bigger than myself to prioritize myself. And I think that that's the part that gets kind of lost when we have these conversations. Like, you can say that, you know, there should be a separation of church and state, but if you are somebody of faith, that's not a thing. It's only a thing in the sense of, at least in my faith, that I know that the God that I serve doesn't want me to use the government to force my faith on other people, because the God that I serve is a God of free will. He wants me to choose him. He wants me to choose to be a person of faith. He's not impressed by me creating laws or putting policy in place to force people to choose my God. That's counterproductive. But what is true is what Kevin said. If I'm a person of faith, when I participate in politics, the kind of leadership that I choose for myself, the kind of representation that I choose for myself is going to come directly from my faith. And that is political.
Yeah. I mean, there is truly no separation of church and state theoretically. Yeah. I understand that we live in a democratic republic, right? So we don't live in a theocracy, and there are many different religions and different beliefs and religious freedom in this country. So I'm not here to suggest that Christianity should reign in the United States. Like that's not what I'm saying when I say that. But what I say from an individual level, if you are a person of faith, then there is an expectation of God from us to conduct ourselves in his ways. As for me and my household, we will follow the Lord. If you don't believe in what I believe, hey, you ain't got to follow it. You probably are not going to follow it. I may try to encourage you to follow it primarily through my example. But look, you got that right. God gave us all free will. So you have the ability to choose to follow him or not follow him or do whatever you want to do. And in America, I don't have the right to impose that on you. But I also have the right in America to allow myself to conduct my vote when I'm doing my whatever I'm doing. My beliefs and my faith will guide me in that. And you know, what I mean to suggest is that sometimes people will put that on the shelf, you know, for other things, for other more self-serving things. They're willing to put their faith on the sideline in order to get things that are going to selfishly benefit them, even if in the process of doing that they violate their beliefs by hurting other people. You know, Christianity at its basis is very selfless. You know, it's based on love, not love of oneself, but primarily love of God and love of others first. And, you know, in America, we are very much an I country. You know, everything is about I. And so when you live in a country that is so focused on self, we take selfies, we got iPhones, everything you post on social media is like, look at me. When you live in that type of environment that promotes self, then that's what, you know, it's hard to put that on the shelf and say, well, I got to be happy. You know, I got to be happy first. If I'm not happy first, then all the rest of this stuff doesn't matter. So, you know, religion and politics, again, in this country is something that is oftentimes not a good mix. And I think if you consider yourself a religious person, yes, you're in the world, but not of the world. So that means you cannot be constrained solely by the norms, the culture, and the things of this world and still consider yourself to be on that higher spiritual plane. And that's the battle, you know, that's the battle that we go through every day.
And I think because of that, she did exactly what she was supposed to do in a moment where she could have chosen to, you know, keep quiet and keep the peace in front of our new nation's leader who exemplifies, in my opinion, no Christian values. She decided to appeal to the part of him who is sitting in this prayer service. So at least you are pretending to believe in the same God that I believe in. And if that is so, if that is true, and anybody else who is watching this service go down, they too need to hear what I have to say from the God who I serve, who I am now a bishop in his church. And so I might just know what I'm talking about. Let me take this moment to put God in the forefront. I think that's what she chose to do, and I'm not mad at her for that.
Yeah. Well, with that, folks, that's all I have. I mean, at the end of the show, I like to circle back around just to make sure that, or to see if there's anything that perhaps people didn't get a chance to say, or maybe something came up. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Nah, I mean, I'm just gonna continue to die on the Bernice King bandwagon. I just gotta go back to that. I mean, come on, man. You know, I wasn't gonna let us get out of here, you know, nice and easy. I had to bring it back up.
You got to bring it back up.
Yeah. I mean, we again, it's a generational thing. I'm gonna work on you, Kevin. We gonna get there one day. We gonna get there one day.
No, it ain't no generational thing, because I think Bernice King, she should apologize to Sexy Red for how she came at her, and Sexy Red has already apologized and stepped away from it. That to me it's all good.
I think at this point, there's no need for any more public conversation about the situation. I think it would just make it bigger than it has to be. I think if we see anything from that situation, I would just love to see some level of a collaboration between the two of those ladies in an effort to again propel Dr. King's legacy forward. Anything else outside of that is just unnecessary.
Agree. I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Hey, there. On a serious note, there was one thing that Raven said earlier that I do kind of agree, not on this subject, but when we were talking earlier, I think it was on the DEI subject, but she was kind of talking about the distractions of Donald Trump and, you know, how he's kind of like a good magician, you know, and good magicians are always able to get you to look at, you know, something else to keep your attention and your focus off of, you know, what they're really doing to get the trick off. And I think, you know, what we kind of have to learn collectively as a society, particularly those of us in the media, you know, Donald Trump does a lot of sleight of hand things, distractive things to to get our attention focused on here, renaming the Gulf of America. I mean, just like a lot of ridiculous things that he does that divert our attention away from the things that he's actually doing. And so I think if Democrats want to have some type of impact on Trump, or to begin to sway the opinions of the general public, I think they need to stop focusing on so much on the outrage over the outrageous things that he does, and focus the stagecraft and focus more on the impact of the actions that he's taking. Like that's where you catch people's attention. I think people are not going to respond to, the new ridiculous thing that Donald Trump said and did, and spending, ad nauseum hours talking about that. Like, I think people are done with that, and people are kind of numb to that. What they may not be numb to, and a lot of times what they might not even be hip to, is the extent to which what he is doing is impacting them. And so I think liberals and Democrats can do a much better job of, okay, if you want to mention it, fine, but you don't need to spend 5 or 6 hours talking about something ridiculous Donald Trump did or said, or he didn't put his hand on the Bible, or all of these other things that these low-hanging fruit arguments that we wind up getting in with him because they're so outrageous and unbelievable, and you've never seen anybody do it before, and more or less really focusing on what he's doing and how it's impacting people. If you want to win over voters, or show people how dangerous what Donald Trump is doing, you got to keep your focus there and not take the cheese on the stagecraft, the sleight of hand that he artfully does over here, which I think a lot of that, this is serious. I'm not saying this isn't serious, but pardon the January 6th, rioters. That is such an outrageous thing that people are going to talk about that. They can't leave it alone. Meanwhile, he's dismantling DEI. He's doing all of these other things over here on the side that's not getting talked about because we're so outraged about the pardoning of the January 6th rioters. Trust me, there's a strategy for why he does everything. He may be crazy, but he's not dumb. And he and the people around him, I think, carefully orchestrate some of these things to distract the public's attention so that they're not paying attention to these other things that are more impactful. And I think the media has to do a better job of not taking that cheese. I think we have to do a better job of not taking that cheese and keeping it focused on the policies and the things that they're doing and the real impact, and showing that real impact of that, for good or bad. Look, that needs to be said. If some of the things that he's doing are bearing fruit and are netting positive results, okay, then it is what it is. But if what he's doing is actually creating negative impacts, you got to be able to show that as well. So that was just my thought from something Raven had said earlier. She's absolutely right. There's a lot of stagecraft, a lot of magicry going on, and oftentimes we fall for it to the detriment of the tricks that he's pulling off to the side.
I could put up a little bit of a resistance to that, but for the sake of time, it's Friday. I will save it. Something tells me we'll have a chance to hit this topic or close to it again sometime in the near future. So I really appreciate. Raven, anything else? Kevin, anything else before we roll out?
No, I'm all good.
All good. I appreciate you both. I thought it was a really strong conversation. Very interesting. I'm gonna go back and listen to more of it. Just to make sure I can process what everybody heard. This show is available on our YouTube channel, Hot Mic Podcast HQ, as in headquarters. We're also on Facebook, but I'm really, really trying to push people toward our YouTube channel where you can subscribe and we can build our community around this podcast right there. So please like and share this podcast. It means a lot to us. And have a great Friday. Thank you so much for your time. Yep. Take it easy.